My Star Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301 Cyborg. After the mechanical skeleton was put in, the mechanical arm took out a muscle again and implanted the artificial muscle prepared on the side into the body of the Sith warrior. Then, tens of thousands of fiber-like tentacles reached into the warrior's body and began to install muscles and connect nerves and blood vessels. After several hours of surgery, except for the brain, organs, fat and skin of the original body, the remaining bones, muscles and blood vessels were replaced by artificial parts on the test bench. Several blue data cables connected the chip in the back of the Sith warrior's brain. The body modification has been completed, and the brain surgery will be carried out next. The officer nodded with satisfaction as he looked at the experimental warrior who had basically completed the surgery. With the issuance of new orders, the mechanical arm removed the part of the warrior that secreted amine substances to produce emotions, and then the pain nerves were also removed from the body. After several more hours, the liquid in the operating table was gradually emptied, and the energy shield of the operating table disappeared. Soldier number 001, can you see me? The officer lay in front of the experimental warrior and waved his hand gently. Now the hypnotic in the body of the experimental subject has been neutralized, and with the stimulation of the electric pulse, he has begun to wake up. Can you see it, sir? The first warrior to be tested said to the officer expressionlessly. Try to break free, the officer ordered again. Then the warrior's body shook violently, and the warrior shook his head gently and said, No, sir, open his restraints. The officer raised his eyebrows to the technician beside him. A burst of metallic sounds came again, and the locks that bound the hands and feet of the Sith warrior were all opened. Come, get used to your new body. The officer stepped aside and looked at the Sith warrior. Number 001 stood up and staggered, but soon he got used to it and began to walk slowly on the floor. Very good, try your Sith power, the officer ordered again. Soldier number 001 nodded, pointed his hand at the container beside him, and with a thought, the container was thrown into the air by his Sith power. Perfect. Perfect. Not only has the original Sith power been maintained, but the effect of the implanted power amplifier is also very obvious. The officer clapped his hands in satisfaction. You sleep first, I will report to His Majesty, the officer ordered number 001. Number 001 walked to a seat beside and sat down. His eyes darkened and he lost consciousness. That's right, he has been transformed into a cyborg warrior by the Special Department of the Empire. This kind of cyborg warrior not only has the thinking ability of a normal person, but also has no emotions and absolute obedience to orders. He also has the physical strength of a combat robot, and most importantly, he has superpowers. These Sith warriors who have been transformed into killing machines will serve as the secret forces of the Empire, such as dealing with some high-ranking figures or Sith warriors who want to rebel. Moreover, in the war, these warriors can also infiltrate the enemy's colonies. The cyborg warriors with strong combat power will become the enemy's nightmare. On the other side, Mingze approved the plan to send more experimental tables after receiving the communication from the officer. Dozens of transport ships carrying transformation equipment and materials slowly docked in the port of the space station. One by one, the unconscious Sith warriors were carried out of the hibernation chamber by the soldiers and placed on the transformation platform. In just 10 days, 3,000 Sith warriors who would betray the Empire in the future have been transformed into an absolutely loyal cyborg army. In the future, these cyborg warriors will play a vital role in the stability of the Empire. They will become the sharp knife in Tianyi's hands to eliminate the enemy for Mingze. 1 month later. Empire Morning News. Welcome to watch today's Empire Morning News. Here is an important news. 1 month ago, the Empire Sith Master Hou Yitao led 3,000 Sith warriors to the Corruptor Star region to perform a special mission, but unfortunately they were attacked by the Corruptor warships 3 days ago, and all of them were buried in the Star Sea. The high-end ground combat power of the Empire suffered heavy losses, and the Empire had no second Sith Master. The sacrifice of Master Hou Yitao set back the research and utilization of the Empire's Sith power by 5 years. We all wrote down the old grudges. One day, His Majesty will lead us back to the Corruptor's hometown to avenge the dead heroes. I believe that this day will not be far away. Mingze turned off the TV and came to the window. He took a sip of fruit wine and silently looked at the starry sky outside the window. He couldn't tell what his mentality was now. He felt that he was a little cold-blooded. Is this a common problem for all rulers? Am I no longer myself? Li Mingze took another sip of fruit wine. You are still yourself, Your Majesty, but you have grown into a real ruler. The lives of your subordinates are no longer an obstacle to your performance. Your thoughts have been sublimated. Tianyi pushed open Li Mingze's door and came to his side and whispered. Do you have to learn to be cold-blooded if you want to be a real ruler? Li Mingze turned around and looked into Tianyi's eyes, hoping to see something from it. You can also be a benevolent ruler, but such an empire will not last long when facing pressure. Isn't there a saying on earth, kindness does not command the army? I think this sentence is very correct. Benevolent rulers are only suitable for maintaining the status quo rather than opening up a foundation. Tianyi shook his head. I understand. Li Mingze seemed to understand something, turned around and sat on the chair without saying anything. 1 month later, the cruiser equipped with a biological host welcomed its maiden voyage. There were only 6 people on the cruiser, including 1 captain, 2 deputy captains and 3 assistants, 3 men and 3 women. The cruiser, which had lost 995 people, would conduct multiple tests on fixed targets, moving targets, irregular moving targets, and shell avoidance. After installing the new biological host to achieve man-ship integration, all attack actions of the cruiser were controlled by the captain himself, while tasks such as avoidance, ship data inspection, and target selection were all the responsibility of a deputy captain, and another deputy captain was responsible for replacement. The 3 assistants were responsible for the operation of the warship during non-combat. Now this man-ship integrated cruiser has flown into the test area. As the warship was in place, 3 different target ships flew out from one side at the same time. 1 stopped in the middle, 1 rushed straight forward, and the last one was doing irregular maneuvers. Fire. With the order from the tester, the deputy captain had already locked the target into the aiming frame, and the ship's biological host, that is, the captain, began to calculate the trajectory and fire, and 3 shells were fired. Chapter 302, Expeditionary Fleet Assembles. In the blink of an eye, 3 different target ships were hit by shells and exploded into pieces. Release 12 target ships. Seeing that the 3 target ships had no pressure on the cruiser, the officer ordered again. This time, 12 target ships in 3 different motion states flew out from both sides of the cruiser and were easily solved by the cruiser again. After the upgrade of this cruiser to integrate man and ship, its computing power has become much stronger. Li Mingze, who is in the royal spaceship, looked at the cruiser not far away with some excitement. Yes, Your Majesty. After eliminating almost all the crew members, a lot of space was freed up in the cruiser. The original sleeping room, lounge, restaurant, and entertainment room were all vacated, and even the food supply was reduced to 6 people. In these vacated spaces, we installed the original cruiser's standard spacecraft host and corresponding energy supply system, which means that this cruiser has 3 times the original computing power. In addition, we also installed some beam cannons into the battleship, and 2 improved shell storms were also installed on both sides of the battleship, which were originally crewed dormitories. These shell storms can be self-loaded using the loading devices in the battleship. The combat effectiveness of this cruiser can be said to have almost doubled. Tianyi's face was full of pride. After all, these designs were designed under her leadership. Perfect. How long will it take for us to convert all the cruisers into this kind of integrated man-ship system? How long will it take to convert the remaining arsenal ships and battleships? Li Mingze asked Tianyi excitedly, as if he had already seen the Empire's fleet crisscrossing the Corruptor Star region. Your Majesty, the modification of our warships is a large project. Although I have tried to simplify it, our current modification capacity can only modify 10 cruisers and 100 frigates a month. As for the battleships, we have not conducted any tests yet. The existing artificial brains cannot withstand the powerful computing power of the battleships. So we cannot modify them yet. Tianyi shook his head regretfully. Carry out the battleship modification experiment as soon as possible. Li Mingze got up and returned to his bedroom. At this time, the cruiser in front of the spaceship was still undergoing various tests. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. The retreat of the Corruptor fleet gave the Empire precious time to recover. The Empire, which has not stopped for a moment in the past 2 years, has restored the 4 fleets to the size before the Sniper. The new modified battleships have also joined the fleet, and the strength of the entire fleet has been improved. However, the addition of the Empire's second super battleship Crescent 023 has completely raised the strength of the Empire's fleet to a higher level. In addition to using the ring world metal to repair the Crescent, the Empire also installed a giant mass projector on this battleship. This projector can project the mass of a battleship to a distance at a time. However, although it has the Empire's material transmission module, the entire Crescent is only equipped with 3 such heavy shells. Some people will definitely wonder what the use of such heavy shells is. They don't fly very fast, and because of their high density, they are only the size of a frigate. In fact, this mass projector is used to cooperate with the main gun of the Empire's Michigan Dreadnought. If the gravity cannon of the Dreadnought is fired, and there is not enough mass nearby to amplify the power of the shells, at this time, the projector on the Crescent will also throw out shells weighing 8 million tons at the moment of the gravity cannon firing. Such a heavy shell will instantly increase the power of the gravity cannon by dozens of times, and the battleships that were originally able to escape will fall into the gravitational wave range of the gravity cannon. Of course, this weapon also has another function, which is to cleanse the planets occupied by the corruptors. The shell weighing 4 million tons was accelerated to 0.002 times the speed of light. The huge kinetic energy it carries will completely destroy the surface of the planet it hits. In addition to the mass projector, the modified Crescent is also equipped with a supercomputer group occupying dozens of cabins. During combat, Tianyi will use the computing power of these computer groups to provide the fleet with auxiliary calculations of shooting trajectories and intelligent division of attack targets. By calculating the attack strength of each ship and the enemy's defense, the fleet's attack targets are uniformly divided to avoid waste of firepower and the waste of shells repeatedly hitting the sunken warships. In addition, through the detection equipment carried by the Crescent and the external Imperial scanning original, the enemy's attack trajectory and activity trajectory are speculated, and the inferred data is added to the attack and dodge of each warship to achieve the effect of enhancing accuracy and dodgeability. This ability, comparable to cheating, is called the overclocking mode without side effects by Mingze. If the overclocking mode of the Singer is combined in battle, the combat power of the Imperial fleet that bursts out instantly will definitely make the enemy despair. After the repairs, the Imperial fleet, which had greatly increased its strength due to the addition of new warships, once again assembled above New Star. The purpose of this assembly is no longer to snipe the enemy's invading fleet, but to fight the enemy's homeland. The Empire wants to extend the war to the territory of the corruptor civilization, and cut flesh from the corruptor bit by constantly consolidating the front line. Our Empire has finally stood up. We drove away the evil civilization that came to invade. But, is the war over? No. The war is not over. The evil invaders are still staying at home safely. They are still planning the next invasion of the Empire. We must kill them all to completely end this war. For the Empire, for your loved ones, and for our beautiful tomorrow, I declare that the Imperial Expeditionary Force is officially established. Pointing the sword at the corruptor's home planet, and set off, Mingze drew the dagger in the command staff and pointed it to the front of the fleet. After flying out of the gravity well range of the ring world, countless warships jumped into hyperspace and disappeared. At this time, in the corruptor civilization star domain, the corruptors did not know that the Empire's expeditionary fleet had already set out. In their impression, the Empire, a civilization that was much weaker than them, would not take the initiative to attack. The corruptors were accumulating strength and preparing to attack the Empire again with hundreds of millions of corruptor fleets next time. For this reason, a large number of intermediate corruptors were selected. What greeted these new intermediate corruptors would be the continuous addition of genes from various creatures for transformation, and finally, after devouring a human, they would completely become a glorious intermediate corruptor. After they adapted, they could begin to hatch their own warships in the nutrient pool. In just over 10 years, the corruptors with fast-growing genes in their bodies became corruptor warship drivers with a warship. Chapter 303, Corpse Transformation. When the Imperial Expeditionary Fleet flew to the corruptor star region, in the morgue of the military hospital of the number 0034 training base on the Empire New Star. Because of a sudden overload of an air conditioner, the circuit in the entire morgue collapsed for 2 seconds, and all the lights went out instantly. 2 seconds later, the system's self-repair program repaired the circuit, and the morgue was restored to light again. But no one noticed that because of the power outage of the system, the ordinary isolation door, which was not made for defense, did not automatically lock after the staff left. At this time, a freezing chamber suddenly began to vibrate violently, as if something was about to break out of it. If Mingze and others were here, they would find that this freezing chamber was storing the soldier who died in the first human-machine integration experiment. Because he was a new human without relatives, no one came to claim the body, so the Empire sealed it up and waited until the Empire had the ability to revive the dead in the future to restore his brain and see if there was anything missing. After all, he was the only one who had contacted the future signal. Bang! 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 The hatch of the entire freezing chamber was suddenly pierced by a pair of blue hands. After twisting at a strange angle, the hands pressed the switch beside the freezing chamber. A sound of exhaust came from the freezing chamber, and the hatch of the vertical freezing chamber slowly opened upwards, and a naked man with a blue body fell out of the freezing chamber. After stumbling 2 steps on the ground, the man just got used to walking. Hiss! A roar that was not like a human suddenly came out of the man's mouth. If someone could scan the man's brain at this time, they would find that the brain that was originally a massive paste had turned into a beating black tumor. Unfortunately, the military hospital did not expect anything to happen in the morgue, so no monitoring equipment was installed. No one would have thought that such a bizarre event of the resurrection of the dead would happen in this accident, and no one knew anything about it. Wife, I'm working overtime tonight, and I may not be able to go back. There was a call at the end of the corridor, and a medical staff member who was making a video call on the intercom walked towards the morgue. The corpse-changed man who was about to push open the door of the morgue immediately turned around and shrank back into the shadows in the corner. With a creak, the door of the morgue was pushed open by the medical staff. As soon as he entered the door, he saw the frozen chamber that had been opened. What's going on? The doctor walked towards the frozen chamber at the end of the room in confusion. He did not see that the eyes of the corpse-changed man hiding in the shadows emitted a green light. The corpse-changed man looked at the doctor's back, hesitated for a moment, and then quietly followed him. When the doctor stood in front of the frozen chamber, the corpse-changed man suddenly pounced forward and bit the doctor's neck with his teeth. As the corpse-changed man bit his neck, the doctor slowly and weakly dropped his hands. Black patterns spread from the position where the corpse-changed man bit towards the doctor's brain, but no black tumor was formed in the brain. At this time, the black tumor in the corpse-changed man's mind became smaller and smaller, until it completely disappeared. The corpse-changed man weakly loosened his mouth and collapsed to the ground, never moving again. A green light flashed in the doctor's eyes, and he moved his body gently, as if he was adapting to this new body. After a moment, the doctor stuffed the corpse back into the freezing chamber with an expressionless face and closed the hatch. Beep, beep, beep. Suddenly, the terminal on the doctor's arm began to flash, but the doctor still had a blank expression, as if he didn't notice the call. After a moment of stunned silence, the doctor, who seemed to be annoyed by the ringing, took off the terminal and threw it aside. After throwing away the terminal and the beeping sound became smaller, the doctor nodded with satisfaction and walked towards the elevator. A few minutes later, the doctor came to a gate in the tunnel beside the hospital. Apply to enter the human body cultivation hall. The doctor inserted the work card on his chest into the opening next to the gate. Please explain the reason. A scrutinizing male voice came from the other end of the gate. There is an abnormality in the body of a new human in the cultivation area. I'll go check it out. The doctor still had a blank expression. Please stand on the testing equipment aside. The person on the other end of the gate ordered the doctor. The doctor stood obediently on the round scanning table. After the circle of green optical fibers scanned him for a few seconds, the indicator light of the access control turned green. The gene sequence and brain wave match. Welcome, Dr. Potter. Please work carefully and don't disturb the sleeping person. The metal door next to the access control slowly opened, and 2 soldiers holding rifles saluted and made way. You should know that in this base with the task of studying mutants and clones, Dr. Potter is one of the 10 people who have access to the cultivation facility. Dr. Potter nodded and walked towards the passage made by the 2 soldiers expressionlessly. When Dr. Potter walked away, the 2 soldiers looked at each other. Why do you feel that Dr. Potter is a little cold today? A soldier scratched his head in confusion. Maybe it's because he has to work so late. He probably isn't in a good mood. Another soldier touched the tip of his nose and didn't care. Well, maybe, although the soldier felt something was wrong, he didn't think much about it. He turned around, closed the alloy door again, and sat down again to play the game. After passing 2 more checkpoints, Dr. Porter came to the cultivation hall deep underground. He came to a workbench, took the system of a cultivation tank in the cultivation hall offline for a short time, turned around and started the floating platform next to it and floated towards the hall. Although Tianyi had noticed the doctor's actions at this time, he did not have too many doubts. The scan just now proved that it was him, and the doctor had done similar things before to check the mutant new human individuals, so Tianyi did not observe more. Dr. Porter controlled the floating platform to come to the cultivation tank he temporarily closed, reached out to open the cultivation tank that had become dark, pulled the naked new human out of the cultivation tank, and lay down in it. The consciousness connector originally inserted into the brain of the cultivated new human was forcibly inserted into his brain. 10, 9, 8, Dr. Porter kept counting down the time for the system to reconnect. At this time, Tianyi had already discovered something wrong and was about to cut off the data connection of this area. 1. After Porter finished speaking, a series of codes that Tianyi could not explain instantly spread to the cultivation tanks of the entire New Star along the virtual world of this terminal. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304, Diffusion. No, Tianyi shouted and looked at the progress bar of the cutoff, but it was too late. This unknown signal had spread through the fictional virtual world to 80% of the culture tanks that had not yet been disconnected. The new humans in these culture tanks opened their eyes instantly, and green light appeared in their eyes that had just adapted to the light of the real world. A black tumor was slowly taking shape deep in their brains. More than 24 billion new humans waiting to mature on the entire New Star were infected and mutated by this strange signal. This signal seemed to change the genetic structure of some of their cells through the recipient's brain. Seeing the growing tumor in the scan, Tianyi realized that things were not going well. She had no choice but to control the power generation device in the culture tank to try to stun these mutated new humans for easy processing. But these people were not stunned by the current, but began to enjoy the energy brought by the current, and the tumors in their brains grew faster and faster. Damn it! How did Dr. Potter escape my scan? Tianyi found that the situation was out of control and couldn't help but gnashing his teeth at the doctor. Wait. How come this special infection mode is so similar to the infection mode of the special Zerg that secretly controlled the Light of Faith Fortress in the Crescent records? Tianyi suddenly thought of something. She was not wrong. The Zerg of the future had already noticed the construction of the Empire's space-time signal transmission equipment. They insidiously sent lurkers to lurk in the base where the Empire's space-time signal transmission equipment was located, and implanted special signals that could cause biological mutations into the information that the Empire wanted to send back. The first person who received this information would be infected by the special signal. It would only take a few days to break out, but the Empire actually froze the soldier's body. If it weren't for the unexpected power outage, this infected body might have continued to sleep. But now the demon has been released, and more than 24 billion new humans have been infected and turned into mutants. As the dense collision sound came, countless culture tanks were broken, and new humans crawled out of the culture tanks one by one. Following the gaps between the culture tanks, they soon came to the ground of the hatching hall. Not long after, a large number of mutants came to the control room through the maintenance escalator. Tianyi looked at the mutants spreading all over New Star, frowned and pulled the emergency alarm, sending the current status of New Star to all garrison terminals. She is now very upset. Why didn't she install a self-destruct device when designing these bases? Who would have thought that under her precise monitoring, the biggest enemy from the future could actually travel through time and space to infiltrate the current empire? But it can't be blamed on her. Even the future empire can be infiltrated into the special existence of the secret department, and the current empire can't find this way of Zerg transmission at all. You know, even the previous generation of civilization with extremely advanced technology was destroyed by the Zerg, let alone their newly grown empire. Your Majesty, we can't let this epidemic spread. You can also see that the infected can still retain certain memories and abilities. If these mutants are mixed into the Empire's fleet, the consequences will be disastrous. I propose to completely destroy the human-making facilities on New Star, and we will go back and rebuild them. Tianyi connected Mingze's communication with a serious expression. Okay, I'll do as you say, Mingze sighed and sat back in his chair. He felt deeply desperate. He didn't expect that his future enemy could still cross time and space to catch up with him now. This made him deeply afraid of the future. Come on, mobilize all the mechanical troops on the ring world to New Star. All soldiers and staff on New Star will be divided into groups and go to various space stations for isolation immediately. All people who behave abnormally, the people around them have the right to shoot them after recording their abnormalities. Mingze sighed again. This time, there will be no less deaths. A few hours later, many staff and soldiers on New Star left New Star on a transport ship and flew to a nearby space station group. Now the infected people on New Star are still controlled in the training base and have not spread out. The reason for evacuating and isolating the troops is to prevent the troops from being infected by the infected people who broke through. After all, the infectious ability of this epidemic is too strong. It can be infected through different media, which is terrifying. And the reason why they are isolated and examined is to prevent there from being infectious bodies like Dr. Porter hiding in the crowd. Unlike those infected people, these infectious bodies that exist for spreading have not formed black tumors in their brains, and the scanning equipment cannot find abnormalities, which is more concealed. However, a closer look reveals that the facial expressions of the infectious bodies are dull, and they speak coldly and emotionlessly. Their temperaments are completely different from those in their lifetime. This is a pity for some people with facial paralysis. After discovering that they cannot smile, they are sent to the isolation room of the space station to wait for review. At this time, the gate of the training base can no longer stop those crazy infected people. They have learned to use tools and easily open the gate from the inside. The design of these gates was not to prevent people inside from escaping. The manual switch for emergency has become a welfare for these infected people. Seeing that there are only 2 last checkpoints, if these infected people break through the last gate, they will be like fish entering the sea. Damn it, if I design buildings based on people in the future, I will chop my hands off. Tianyi, who seemed to be angry when he saw the infected people breaking through the training base and spreading outward quickly, was itching. Fortunately, the last 2 doors were designed to be more complicated, and the IQ of these infected people was not enough to open them. Aim the energy weapons, and when the base gate is opened, attack the inside of the gate. Tianyi controlled the orbital defense platform that had been modified to be able to shoot at 360 degrees and moved to the gates of each base to wait. Dozens of hours later, the last gate of the base was broken through by the infected. These infected people seemed to have a mysterious way of contact. If the infected people in one base found a way to open the door, the infected people in all bases would know it. The rhythm of their breaking the gate became surprisingly consistent. Fire! Tianyi gritted his teeth and ordered as he looked at the black mass of infected people pouring out. Thousands of huge beams shot towards the open base gate, and the violent energy went all the way down along the passage of the open gate, turning all the lives and objects on the road into ashes. Second shot. Attack. Tianyi did not stop the attack, but ordered the turret to continue firing until the entire training base was completely melted. Chapter 305 Multinational Leaders Meeting. The second energy beam instantly penetrated into the underground hall of the training base, and countless infected people and training facilities were turned into ashes. After waiting for dozens of minutes, Tianyi breathed a sigh of relief when he found that no more infected people crawled out of the underground base. At this time, the transport ship that took off from the ring world also arrived at the port of New Star with a robot army. A billiard ball-shaped robot was thrown on the ground. As the robot stretched out, 4 mechanical legs stretched out from the sphere and inserted into the ground. Enter the training base. I must make sure there are no survivors. All living objects are completely destroyed. Tianyi ordered the robot army. The robot army received the order and walked into the underground cave that was burned black with neat steps. Tianyi, how much is the loss? Mingze asked after connecting to Tianyi's communication. Your Majesty, our new human training facilities have been damaged by 80%. We need to replace the supercomputer for the remaining 20% before we can use it. The underground base has also been destroyed. We need to renovate and reinforce the underground base. Tianyi shook his head regretfully. During the period of war between the Empire and the Corruptors, there were no extra resources to build human cultivation facilities. All resources had to be tilted towards the fleet. Moreover, the population of the Empire is already large enough. Nearly 100 billion people are enough to support the current development of the Empire. Perhaps only when the next major development is needed will more people be needed. Now it seems that only the remaining 20% can be used to slowly create new humans. A few days later, all corners of New Star were explored by the robot troops. All living things and corpses were purified into ashes to ensure that there was no possibility of resurgence. Then the chemical defense troops entered New Star and began to disinfect and clean up one base after another. The reactivation of New Star may be postponed to a few months later. The paralyzed soldiers who were locked in the isolation room of the space station were also released after being confirmed that they were not infected. It seems that the only more hidden infected person is Dr. Potter. This crisis that almost caused the destruction of the Empire was strangled in the cradle. Mingze couldn't help but feel very fortunate that the Empire was an autocratic centralized country. If the Empire was a democratic country, the obstruction from different voices among the people would probably make the Empire miss the best time to annihilate the infected. Once the infected ran out, the spread of the epidemic would certainly not be effectively controlled, and the destruction of the Empire was only a matter of time. In the 2 years when the Sith Empire was actively preparing for war, the New Human Federation successively contacted the two human civilizations of Madeira Federation and Tucson, United States. In this way, together with the Slotchy Business Federation that was established through the Republic of Andorra, the number of human civilizations that the New Human Federation had established had reached 4. After mutual communication and exchanges, the relationship between the New Human Federation and these human countries has become much closer. Several countries are willing to unite, abandon friction and war with each other, cooperate peacefully, and develop harmoniously together. To this end, the New Human Federation specially held the first multinational leaders conference in the capital Deep Blue Star, inviting several known human civilization leaders to discuss matters of common development. After a month of preparation, the first multinational leaders conference was officially held. With flashes of light, the spaceships and escort fleets of the leaders from the 4 surrounding human civilization countries appeared in the capital star system of the New Human Federation. Mingze stood in front of the window of the Deep Blue Star orbital space station, looking at the 4 different styles of warships and took a sip of fruit wine. Because the Corruptor Star region is too far away from the current Imperial Star region, it takes up to 1.5 months to fly from the Empire to the Corruptor Star region. Mingze came to the New Human Federation to preside over the signing of the non-aggression treaty during the fleet's flight. That's right. The reason why the New Human Federation held a multinational leaders conference this time was to launch the non-aggression treaty planned by the Empire. Use these treaties to continuously deepen the relationship between the various countries, and then use the mutual defense treaty to pull a wave of friendship, and the Empire can formally propose the establishment of an alliance in many countries. Mr. President, the leaders of the 4 civilizations have arrived at the port. A guard pushed open the door and reported to Mingze. Well, I'll go right away. Mingze nodded, straightened his collar and walked out of the door. Welcome to all the leaders of civilizations. He walked down the stairs of the reception hall of the spaceport slowly, holding a bottle of Blue Star picking wine in his hand. No, President Lee, you are too polite. Several leaders came over with a smile. In the friendly exchanges between countries over the past year, several leaders have met several times in holographic calls. It can be said that they have a very good impression of each other and are relatively familiar with each other. Come on, this bottle is the best bottle in our federal specialty star picking wine every year. Mingze waved his hand, and the maid next to him sent 5 cups to the leaders. After filling the wine for everyone clinked glasses and drank it all. Good wine. Good wine. It's much better than the imported goods we tasted before. A leader smacked his lips and said with satisfaction. It seems that President Lee, you usually keep the best in the country. Another leader laughed and joked. No, just this bottle. Come on, please come in. Let's go to the conference room. Mingze smiled and turned sideways, making a gesture of invitation. Soon, the 4 leaders, led by Mingze, came to the door of the conference room of the federal government building. Under the flash of the reporters from the 5 countries, the soldiers standing at the door opened the door for Mingze and the 4 leaders. As Mingze and others took their seats, the reporters also stood in the press area on the side under the guidance of the guards. Dear leaders, our countries have spent more than a year in friendship and peace. In this year and more, we have conducted in-depth understanding and communication through various channels and deepened our understanding of each other. Although I don't know why, we are essentially the same race, humans. In this dangerous universe, I think we humans don't need to fight each other. Such a vast starry sky is available for us to develop, Li Mingze said to the four leaders with a serious expression. Yes, President Li said it very well. As a human race of the same origin, we can't focus our energy on fighting each other, a peace-loving leader voiced his support. For this reason, I specifically propose here that our 5 civilizations sign a non-aggression treaty. If anyone violates the treaty, the remaining countries can jointly attack. Li Mingze nodded and threw out the theme of today's conference, a blockbuster bomb. Chapter 306, Reaching the Corruptor Border. The content of the agreement is that our 5 civilizations cannot accumulate more than 10% of their total military forces at the borders of each country. In addition, all borders that have contact will be divided into 0.5 light-year distances as buffer zones, and the 2 countries are not allowed to send troops within the buffer zone. Li Mingze said the content of the agreement and looked around at the other people. We, the Saluki Business Federation, agree to this agreement. We should all be in harmony and strengthen business communication. The president of the Saluki Business Federation nodded. As a civilization ruled by a chamber of commerce composed of several monopoly companies, the external peaceful environment is conducive to their maximization of their business advantages and facilitates their business activities between different civilizations. If the new human federation had not proposed this non-aggression agreement, their Saluki Business Federation would have proposed it, which is why they responded so actively. We, the Republic of Andorra, agree to this agreement. The president of the Republic of Andorra also nodded. As the first civilization to have contact with the Federation, they still have a very high degree of favorability towards the Federation, and they have seen the hospitality of the Federation people. We, the Madeira Federation, also agree to this agreement. The president of the Madeira Federation also nodded in agreement. The 4 people who had agreed to the agreement turned their heads and looked at the somewhat hesitant president of the United States of Tucson. The president of the United States, who was somewhat embarrassed by the crowd, also agreed. The United States had just established contacts with several civilizations 7 months ago. He was still a little worried that there was a fraud in the non-aggression agreement. Very good, since everyone has agreed to this non-aggression agreement, then sign this agreement. If anyone violates the agreement, then don't blame the rest of us for attacking them, Li Mingze said as he handed the agreement in his hand to everyone. After the leaders signed their names on the agreement, they took out the official seals they carried with them and stamped them hard on the agreement. Li Mingze stood up and collected several agreements together and put them in a huge alloy can. Several leaders also stood up and placed their hands on top of the alloy can. At this moment, the flashlights of many reporters lit up instantly, recording this great historical moment in the memory card. The signing of the non-aggression agreement was the foundation for the establishment of the alliance in the future. This great moment was called United Day by the Alliance in the future. 10 days later, the Empire's fleet appeared in the nearest star system outside the Corruptor Star region. The hyperspace wave shielding device is ready to start. All warships enter the shielding range of the battleships to jump. With the order of Li Mingze, whose consciousness had been transferred, the fleet's formation began to change. The tail of the battleship in the Empire's fleet began to stretch out a huge antenna array of the hyperspace wave shielding device. Invisible spheres wrapped around the battleships that deployed the wave shielding device and the surrounding cruisers and arsenal destroyers. Your Majesty, the hyperspace wave shielding devices of all warships have been activated. An officer turned his head and reported to Li Mingze, who was floating in the center of the bridge. Start jumping. With Li Mingze's order, the huge Empire fleet disappeared in the universe one after another and flew towards the Corruptor Star region. 5 days later. Corruptor Star region A071 star system. Under the effect of the Corruptor's hyperspace trap, the Empire's fleet suddenly appeared next to the space fortress of this star system with flashes. The Corruptor soldiers who did not find anyone jumping out of hyperspace from the hyperspace radar were puzzled, because no alarms were sounded in the fortress. This fleet suddenly came to their star field without their knowledge. It was terrible. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The control room of the space fortress was in chaos. The sudden appearance of the Empire's fleet without any sign caused their automatic defense program, detecting space fluctuations, turret charging, attack, to not be triggered. It even caused their fortress computer to crash for 2 seconds, and its logic analysis module could not analyze why this fleet suddenly appeared next to the fortress. The 2-second crash also gave the Empire fleet time to prepare. Under Li Mingze's orderly command, Many warships had already started charging their main weapons. After a while, the main guns of the space fortress that reacted also began to slowly turn towards the direction of the Empire fleet to prepare for the attack. But the Empire fleet did not give them a chance. The shell storms carried by the modified battleships and cruisers were the first to be fired. Following closely behind the shell storm were the secondary gun shells and shipborne missiles that were first fully charged. When the shells, secondary gun shells, and missiles of the shell storm were about to attack the Corruptor fortress, the fleet's main guns also fully charged and fired at the Corruptor's warships. Facing the overwhelming shells, many officers in the control room of the Corruptor fortress closed their eyes in despair. As the mass acceleration shells rained down on the shield of the Corruptor fortress, the shield, which was not strong to begin with, was instantly smashed and dissipated in the air. Then the secondary gun shells and missiles flew in and hit the outer armor of the fortress like a heavy hammer. The huge impact force and the energy generated by the missile explosion made the exposed biological structure on the outside of the entire fortress begin to turn red, and the surface temperature also rose sharply, and even some parts of the device outside the fortress began to melt. The surface temperature of the Corruptor fortress has reached 1000 degrees Celsius, and some of the low melting point devices on their surface have been melted, an officer reported while looking at the highlighted heat hologram on the holographic screen in front of him. Very good, their energy absorption is almost reaching the upper limit, and this wave of main guns can basically get rid of them. Mingze nodded with satisfaction. As he expected, when the main gun shells flying from behind hit the Corruptor fortress, the first row of shells did not break the armor of the fortress, but only raised the temperature of the exterior of the Corruptor fortress again, and the exposed tissue as dazzling. However, the second row of shells easily penetrated the armor piece by piece and rushed into the interior of the fortress. The third row of shells that followed closely followed the opening torn by the second row of shells and tore the entire fortress into several huge fragments. There were bursts of explosions from time to time at the cracks where the fragments were exposed. After a few seconds, the huge explosions inside these fragments tore the fragments completely apart. Soon, only a pile of tiny debris remained where the fortress had been. Chapter 307, Long-Lost Burning Glass. The orbit has been cleared. The Crescent is ready to launch a purification attack on the Corruptor planet, Mingze ordered in a deep voice while looking at the pale red planet in front of the fleet. According to the hyperspace detector carried by the Dreadnought, the garrisons in several nearby star systems are urgently jumping towards this star system, with a number of up to 30 million. If the Empire does not make a quick decision and is caught up by them, it will fall into the disadvantageous situation of being surrounded. You must know that now they have entered the star field of the Corruptor, and the Empire's supply capacity has been reduced to the minimum. The material transfer station used to transport materials is still under emergency construction on the way here, and it will take at least a month to complete the construction. By then, the Empire's fleet will have the ability to replenish at any time, so that it can continue to carry out guerrilla warfare outside the Corruptor star field and eliminate the Corruptor's living forces. Your Majesty, the Crescent mass projector is ready. Do you want to launch it? Fire. Mingze nodded and pressed the button in his hand. After seeing Mingze press the unlock button, the captain of the Crescent also pressed the launch button in front of him. A warhead the size of a frigate ejected from the belly of the Crescent, whizzing towards the Corruptor planet ahead. On the pale red planet of the Corruptor in the orbit of the Imperial fleet, densely packed black skyscrapers stood on the ground full of magma. Under the metal shell of the building, there were still roots of red biological tissues wriggling from time to time. These buildings were built by special architectural corruptors. By integrating biology with technology, a skyscraper tens of thousands of meters high can be grown in a short period of time. The energy of the building all comes from the magma underground. Through special biological tentacles inserted into the magma to obtain energy and provide it to the entire building. This is why the ground of the Corruptor city is full of magma. However, as the height increases, it comes to the area thousands of meters above these buildings. Above the clouds, polygonal platforms bloom on the top of the buildings. There are jungles, grasslands, and lakes on these platforms. The huge ecological platforms are endless, forming the surface world of this planet. The buildings wrapped by these ecological platforms are where the high-rise Corruptors live. Each skyscraper has only a few families. The part under the clouds is where the Corruptors who have not evolved completely live, that is, the lower Corruptors live. Although the environment is harsh, the living area of each person is very large. Each building that is tens of thousands of meters high can accommodate less than 500 corruptor families, which is also related to the fact that the walls in these high-rise buildings are all crudely made. In order to pursue speed, the buildings hatched by the builders are matched with alloy frames, and the interior decoration is naturally not much better. It is empty. And connecting these corruptor high-rise buildings are aerial trestle bridges, and huge corruptor bus spaceships float under the trestle bridges from time to time. Passengers who arrive at the station are placed on the trestle bridge between buildings under the tentacles of the spacecraft. Moore is a corruptor lower-class citizen who has just obtained low-level evolutionary authority. The low-level evolutionary authority he obtained allows him to go to the evolution center to evolve himself into a corruptor with some basic abilities such as a builder or an underground pipeline dredge. However, even this low-level evolutionary authority was only obtained after he won the 101st place in the advanced exam in school. He only needs one more place to obtain the intermediate evolutionary authority. You should know that it takes a lot of resources to evolve each person. The higher the level of evolution, the more resources it consumes. The highest level ultimate evolver is said to be able to hatch a battleship by himself. This is out of reach for a poor student like him. Not only that, because of the huge resources consumed, all those who have obtained the evolutionary authority must serve the corruptor civilization government for their entire lives. Correspondingly, they also obtained the qualification to live in the upper society on the cloud. This afternoon, Moore will be able to enter the evolution center for low-level evolution. Excited, he ran to his goddess's house to confess. Unexpectedly, the goddess, who usually didn't even look at him, looked at him straight in the eye after hearing that he was about to become a low-level evolver, and agreed to let him be her spare tire. Moore, who was so excited, went to the bar to hang out for an afternoon, and then came to an empty house in the high-level residential area on the cloud. Although he has not yet evolved, his authority has been adjusted to low-level authority, and he has also obtained the qualification to enter the upper-class society accordingly. He is here to choose a house he likes as his new home for a low-level corruptor. Suddenly, bursts of explosions and flames came from the sky, and the huge fortress that was originally hanging in the sky was blown to pieces. Then the broken fragments of the fortress slid from the sky like meteors, igniting dazzling flames. This he couldn't believe it. Who could actually smash their huge border fortress into fragments all over the sky? The shrill alarm seemed to be a step late, and it began to sound in the city after the border fortress in orbit was shattered. Moore, who noticed something was wrong, ran quickly to the door of a building not far away. Each building has a fast passage leading directly to the underground shelter. As long as he can run into the passage, he will be basically safe. Sorry, you don't have permission to enter this high-level house, and this house does not belong to you personally. The sound of the room access control made him cold from head to toe. At this time, the Empire's Crescent Dreadnought had already aimed at the planet of the Corruptor and launched a mass projectile. The huge shell weighing 4 million tons was accelerated to 0.002 times the speed of light and rushed towards the ground. The huge shell was rubbed by the atmosphere in the sky and emitted a dazzling red light. Then the red light flew into the city's underground and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Moore's eyes were full of despair. After waiting for a moment, he found that there was no vibration, and his eyes returned to normal. But he soon knew what the calm before the storm was. In the distance, a huge magma bubble suddenly swelled up in the place hit by the shells falling from the sky. And then the magma bubble deflated downwards. As the magma bubble deflated, a magma wall tens of thousands of meters high began to emerge on the ground, and the magma wall was mixed with fragments of the corruptor's buildings. As the magma wall continued to advance towards where Moore was, all the buildings along the way were lifted up into the sky and cracked into pieces and swallowed by the lava wall. Public spacecraft were swallowed by the magma wall before they could escape. At this time, a huge shock came from Moore's feet. Chapter 308 Big Fish. The huge vibrations from Moore's feet caused the entire building to sway violently, and some free-range animals on the ecological platform began to run around in panic. Oh my god, Moore knew that under such a strong attack, even if he hid in a shelter tens of kilometers underground, he would definitely die. Anyway, he would die anyway, so he had given up running away. Looking at the huge magma wall getting closer and closer, Moore closed his eyes, and after a moment of scorching heat, he lost consciousness. Unlike the doomsday scene on the ground, because the plates of the entire planet began to move under the huge impact of the shells, the shelters hiding tens of kilometers underground also began to be torn apart with the movement of the plates, and the steel beams that maintained the structure of the shelters began to bend under the huge force. As the lava wall on the ground approached, the shelters under the ground were also swallowed by the magma that emerged from the ground. The shock-absorbing structure designed at the beginning seemed so pale and powerless in the face of such an attack that could destroy the planet. Looking down from the orbit of this planet, you can see that after the huge shells were sunk, the surface of the planet suddenly bulged up a big bag, and then the bag broke open to form a huge high wall. The lava wall of more than 10,000 meters high is clearly visible in the orbit, just like a huge mountain range suddenly rose on this planet. The area of this mountain range is still expanding. As time goes by, this circle of lava walls is getting bigger and bigger, and soon it spreads to half of the planet. And the places where the lava wall passes have all turned into a bright yellow and red magma sea. All traces of human beings have disappeared. In this lava sea that occupies half of the planet and is still expanding, you can see from time to time a 1,000-meter-high lava fountain gushing out of the magma sea and shooting into the sky. Tisk, 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 it's just a scene of hell, Mingze, who was standing in front of the dreadnought porthole, sighed as he looked at the red planet in front of him with his hands behind his back. Send out drones to collect attack data, and we will evacuate after collecting the data. Mingze turned his head and ordered the officer next to him. Yes, sir. The officer saluted and turned away in small steps. At this time, in the planetary capital on the back of the planet, the governor of the planet walked into the evacuation spacecraft that had just been prepared. Sir, are we just going to abandon them like this? An officer asked hesitantly. Then you can stay and die with these low-level corrupted people and low-level corrupted people. The governor turned around and looked at the officer coldly, and kicked him from the entrance of the spacecraft into the abyss of the airport. With a scream of awe, the officer disappeared in front of everyone. The frightened people hurriedly wiped the cold sweat from their foreheads, and did not dare to say anything to anger the governor, who was angry. Damn it, I finally got the ownership of this border planet at the coming of age ceremony. I thought I could live a good life relying on this planet, but I didn't expect that the enemy would hit my doorstep in just 100 years. The governor sighed and sat on his special seat. It's okay, sir. You can apply for a new planet from your family. The destruction of this planet is completely force majeure. Our enemy, the Sith Empire, is too cunning. We are no match for it, a subordinate with a sly look said to the governor in a flattering way. Yes, it is force majeure. The enemy of our civilization is too powerful. We, a remote planet without a fleet stationed, have no power to fight them. The governor nodded with satisfaction. That's right, the officers and government officials around hurriedly nodded in agreement. A moment later, the corruptor destroyer docked in the capital's airport retracted its tentacles clinging to the airport, and the thrusters at the bottom suddenly ejected, flying towards the starry sky with the anti-gravity engine. Corruptors generally don't have anti-gravity engines. Only destroyers and above with intermediate evolutionary authority have anti-gravity engines. Your Majesty, we have detected a signal of a spaceship escaping at high speed. A radar officer suddenly looked up and shouted to Mingze. Only dreadnoughts are currently equipped with radars that can penetrate the planet and scan the other side. The fleet will detach a modified battleship formation to chase this spaceship. Mingze nodded and allocated 20 improved battleships from the fleet to chase the fleeing spaceship. At this time, the corruptors evacuated the spaceship. After seeing that the Imperial fleet had discovered their spaceship and separated a battleship formation, the governor was frightened and hurriedly took over the control of the spaceship himself. Enter emergency jump. As the governor continued to press the button on the console, the spaceship's console made a series of popping sounds. It has not yet escaped from the planet's gravity well. If it enters hyperspace, the probability of the ship sinking is as high as 99.8%. The system gave a cold feedback, and the holographic screen in front of it turned into a red exclamation mark. Damn it, let's go to that asteroid belt. The corruptor governor's eyes suddenly lit up when he saw the asteroid belt not far away. Their spaceships are much smaller than the Empire's battleships, and at most they are 2/3 the size of the Empire's cruisers. Such a small spaceship can fully play its flexibility advantage and use the asteroid belt to shake off the Empire's warships, following behind. As soon as he thought of it, the corruptor governor controlled the spaceship and rushed into the asteroid belt on the left-hand side. The following Empire warships saw the corruptor fleet escape into the asteroid belt and wanted to evacuate, but suddenly received an order from Mingze that they must capture it, so they had to rely on the hard hull and shield to chase into the asteroid belt. It wasn't that Mingze had to kill them all, But he suddenly thought that those who could escape by boat at this time must not be small fish, and the other party might know the distribution of forces in the Corruptor star field. If the distribution map of these warships and the distribution map of space stations in the galaxy could be obtained, then the Imperial fleet would not only fight guerrilla warfare outside the Corruptor star field, but also penetrate deep into the enemy's hinterland and deal a heavy blow to the Corruptor's living forces. The Corruptor governor, who thought he could escape by fleeing into the asteroid belt, was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that these Imperial warships would actually rush in with their guns, completely ignoring the meteorites that hit their ships. Damn it, we can't be caught by them. The Corruptor governor controlled the spaceship to shuttle rapidly between the meteorites. Suddenly, a meteorite rushed out from behind another meteorite and hit the tail of the spaceship. With a huge explosion, the Corruptor governor's spaceship completely stopped in place. Chapter 309 Black Box. We surrender. I am a high-level Corruptor. I want to apply for the corresponding prisoner treatment. Seeing that there was no way to escape, the Corruptor governor hurriedly sent a surrender message to the Imperial fleet. Under the aiming of the Imperial battleship's guns, the Corruptor evacuated the battleship and lowered its guns to allow the Imperial battleship to shine the tractor beam on the spacecraft. After a while, the spacecraft was pulled back to the planetary orbit where the Imperial main fleet was located. At this time, the Corruptor planet had been almost completely swallowed by the magma wall. The circumference of the circular lava wall began to become smaller and smaller after crossing the equator, and the corresponding volume began to increase. The height of the lava wall also rose to a height of nearly 20,000 meters. In those places that have not been swallowed by the lava wall, the huge crustal movement has caused dense cracks to appear on the ground, and huge gullies have appeared out of thin air on the flat ground. The original giant buildings have almost collapsed. Because this planet is located in a remote area and there are no corruptors with intermediate evolutionary authority on the planet, there is no spacecraft that can leave the planet's atmosphere. Of course, this is also related to the poor mobility of the population of the corruptors. There are no passenger ships and transport ships traveling between the planets, which means that the people on this planet have no ability to escape to space. They can only watch helplessly in their homes as they are swallowed by the lava wall. Tens of minutes later, the last piece of safe land was also swallowed by the lava wall. The towering lava walls exploded together and turned into a rain of fire. Small waves of lava spread from the collision point to the surrounding areas of the planet, but because the density of the lava was too high, the kinetic energy generated by the collision pushed these small waves to only move a short distance before disappearing. After a few hours, the entire planet completely returned to calm, but at this time the planet had also become a complete lava planet. The jungles, lakes and grasslands that were originally located between the cities of the corruptors have all turned into oceans of magma. The corruptors on this planet were also buried in the lava sea along with their city. Your Majesty, we have collected data on the destruction of this planet, and we have also captured the evacuation ship that escaped. The other party has been put into the cargo hold of the Crescent Dreadnought. Qiyu came behind Li Mingze and said, "Okay, let's retreat." Li Mingze nodded, and the Imperial fleet flew towards the edge of the star system under the command of Tianyi. Soon, the Imperial fleet disappeared in the starry sky. 2 days later, 3 fleets consisting of 10 million low-level corruptor frigates appeared in the star system. But they could no longer find any trace of the Imperial fleet. The Imperial fleet only left them a planet that had turned into a lava planet. Sir, the 5 million low-level corruptor civilians and 50,000 low-level corruptors on this planet have all been killed by the Sith Empire. A corruptor warship circled the planet and sent a message back to the fleet flagship after confirming that there were no survivors. Have you found the black box? The corruptor commander frowned. The black box is being searched. The attack on this planet was too strong. Because of the movement of the Earth's crust, the black box is no longer in its original position. In addition, the thick magma layer blocked the signal. The reporting officer lowered his head. Wait, sir, we found the black box. The officer seemed to have received a report from his subordinates and suddenly raised his head and said, "On the corruptor planet that has become a lava planet, a huge corruptor destroyer is quietly suspended above a magma pool, and countless red tentacles extend into the lava pool under the warship." After a while, accompanied by a burst of lava bubbles rolling, dozens of thick tentacles holding a red metal ball rose up. After the destroyer's tentacles put the metal ball into the cargo hold of the warship, several tentacles began to pry rhythmically on the surface of the metal ball. With the sound of the gears running, The metal shell of the metal ball slowly opened, and a red tumor was exposed. At this time, the 3 commanders of the corruptor had also arrived at the cargo hold of the destroyer. Open it and ask the recorder what happened on this planet. A corruptor commander frowned and ordered the soldier beside him. Yes, sir. The soldier walked to the red flesh ball and inserted a hand extending from the flesh ball into the interface behind his brain. As an unidentified voice came out of the ball began to bloom like a chrysanthemum, revealing a corruptor covered in mucus. This corruptor's body was full of various tubes and data cables, and his skin was an unhealthy white. This is the intermediate corruptor that every corruptor planet has, the recorder. The function of these recorders is to record everything that happened in the entire planet and the places that can be observed in the star system. After reaching the limit every 100 years, they will start to cover from 100 years ago. The reason for leaving a recorder, or black box, on each planet is to enable the ruler to know every move that happened on the planet and maintain the rule of the ruler. By the way, after a natural disaster or war breaks out, it can also know what happened on the planet, so as to make preventive preparations in the future. The shell made of super alloy and the thick energy-absorbing tissue inside can ensure that the recorder in this black clamp can survive for more than 5 days, even if it is immersed in magma, and wait for rescue. The originally sleeping recorder slowly opened his eyes after the sphere was opened. Hello, sir. Seeing the group of high-level corruptors surrounding him, the recorder hurriedly said. Tell us what happened to this planet, a corruptor commander said with a serious expression. The fleet of the Sith Empire suddenly appeared next to the fortress in our planet's orbit. It only took 1 round of salvos for the Empire's fleet to destroy the fortress in our orbit, then the Empire's fleet fired a kinetic artillery shell at the planet. The power of this kinetic weapon is really too terrifying. At this point, the recorder seemed to recall some terrifying scenes, and his face became a little hideous. Read the video data he stored. A corruptor commander waved his hand and asked the soldier next to him to connect a terminal to the data interface behind the recorder. After a while, a holographic screen appeared in front of everyone. The holographic screen showed the scene when the Empire's mass projection shells just flew through the atmosphere, followed by the formation of the lava wall, and the scene of the lava wall constantly advancing and swallowing the city. Chapter 310, Second Generation of Officials. Damn it. We can't let these Imperial fleets go any deeper. After seeing the tragic situation of this planet, a corruptor commander roared angrily. You know, although they keep humans as meat animals, they only extract hundreds of millions of people from these civilizations every 100 years. This level of population reduction is not a bit of pressure for interstellar civilizations with tens of billions of people. This is already cruel, but the corruptors, have never completely purified a planet with life. This is really too anti-corruptor. Their fleet is heading to another border star system. We must hurry over. Moreover, the governor of this planet, the son of the ultimate evolutionary General Levi, Liss, may also have fallen into the hands of the Sith Empire. If we can't bring General Levi's son back in time, the consequences can be imagined. You know, the power of their family is second only to the 5 marshals and the head of state. The commander poured cold water on the other 2 commanders who looked indifferent. No. General Levi's son is actually the governor of such a remote star system, the other 2 corruptor commanders stuttered. The commanders who only commanded a few border fleets of the corruptor, were not comparable to General Levi who could command the main fleet of the corruptor. The other family also had great power in the corruptor empire. If the corruptor commanders of these small families angered such a giant, the end would be imaginable. Who knows? This planet was a gift from his father to him at his coming-of-age ceremony. So we should hurry up and catch up to rescue this young master. If we can rescue him, everything will be fine. I'm afraid, the corruptor commander who knew the whole story sighed. Then why are you still standing there? Let's go. The other 2 corruptor commanders shouted hurriedly. After the 3 commanders hurriedly returned to their respective fleets, the 3 border fleets drove at maximum speed and flew towards the outer edge of the star system. The Imperial fleet in hyperspace. Mingze came to the huge warehouse where the corruptor evacuation warship was stored. The corruptor warship had been tightly wrapped by a layer of light blue shield, and dozens of blue chains were tied to the hull. The function of this layer of shield is to prevent the corruptor warship from self-destructing inside the Empire's dreadnought, and the chains are to lock the dozens of tentacles on the ship. I'll give you 20 minutes to come out and surrender. Mingze pressed the voice button next to the console, and his majestic voice was transmitted to the corruptor warship through the huge speakers around the warehouse. At this time, inside the corruptor warship, a group of officers and Governor Lys looked at each other. "Governor, let's go down. Anyway, we have nowhere to escape on the spaceship," an officer said cautiously. "Hey, let's go. You behave better and try to give us better prisoner treatment," Governor Lys, who had been pampered since childhood, sighed and instructed. He didn't want to be locked in a cage with a group of people. That was really a loss of his identity. "We surrender. I am General Levi's son. I request high-ranking prisoner treatment." Just when Li Mingze was getting impatient, a handsome young man walked down the deck of the spaceship with his hands raised high. A group of officers quietly raised their hands and followed the young man, not daring to say a word. "Oh? General Levi's son, could it be that he is really a big fish? This General Levi seems to have a very high position in the corruptor civilization, otherwise these officers would not obey him." Li Mingze secretly rejoiced that he could catch a big fish in the border galaxy he chose casually. What an unexpected harvest. "Soldiers, escort them to different cells according to their ranks. The one who claims to be General Levi's son, send him to our own isolation room." Li Mingze waved his hand, and the soldiers who had been waiting for a long time rushed over and handcuffed the hands of the corruptor officers one by one. "You officers are not as brave as the soldiers we captured. It seems that every civilization has this common problem. If you stay in a high position for a long time, you will be afraid of death." Li Mingze looked at the several corrupt officers who walked by him and trembled all over, shaking his head and muttering to himself. After a while, Governor Lys was escorted by the soldiers to the isolation room inside the Imperial fleet. Considering the comfort of the isolated patients, the isolation room used by the Empire is fully equipped with a living room, kitchen and bedroom. Of course, this is inseparable from the fact that the space of the dreadnought is too large, so large that it can be wasted unscrupulously. The soldier opened Lys's handcuffs and pushed him into the isolation room. "Hey, this is okay, not bad." Corruptor Governor Lys looked around the environment in the isolation room and smacked his lips with satisfaction. At this time, the isolation door at the end of the passage where he came in was heavily closed, and the second isolation door at the other end of the passage was also locked, and the passage was filled with highly corrosive liquid to ensure that the corruptor could never escape. You have to know that the outer side of this isolation room is wrapped with a 1-meter thick battleship armor and a half-meter thick composite shell. Even if the red dot is thrown in, you can't get out for more than 10 days. What's more, this isolation room has 360-degree blind spot monitoring and scanning devices of various frequency bands. The scanning device originally used to observe unknown infections has become an excellent device for monitoring this corruptor. Once the isolation room is found to have any abnormal movement, a strong current of up to 30 million volts or a high temperature of 5,000 degrees can instantly turn anything in this room into ashes. Lys, who was locked in the isolation room, was very thoughtful. He threw himself on the sofa as if he was back home. Thinking of something, he got up and took out a few bottles of the Empire's specialty drinks from the refrigerator next to him, opened them together and drank them all. After burping with satisfaction, he sat back on the sofa and watched TV. From time to time, he grabbed a handful of snacks from the snack plate next to him and stuffed them into his mouth. There was no trace of panic of being captured. This situation made Li Mingze, who was standing in the monitoring room, frown. It was the first time he had seen someone who did not treat himself as a prisoner. It seemed that this corrupt official's second generation was very difficult to deal with. "Open the door, I'll go in." Li Mingze looked up and signaled to the soldier beside him. The soldier hurriedly pressed the password on the access control. After all the acidic liquid in the passage was sucked away and the nozzle was cleaned again, the door of the isolation room was opened to make way for a passage. Li Mingze walked into the isolation room slowly through the passage with his hands behind his back. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311 Bewitched. Lys turned his head in surprise when he heard the noise at the door. He thought that the Sith Empire would interrogate some other officials first before interrogating him, but he didn't expect that they would come to him so soon. "You are the son of General Levi." Li Mingze was the first to break the silence. stretched out his hand to pull a chair from the side and sat in front of Liz. Yes, yes, Liz hesitated for a moment and nodded. Oh? Then what is the status of your father in your civilization? You'd better tell the truth, otherwise I will torture you. Li Mingze stared at the eyes of the corrupt official second generation. My father, he is the commander of the first main fleet of our country, and he is also a 5-star admiral. Our family is also the 6th largest family in our country. As long as you are willing to let my family redeem me, all kinds of conditions can be negotiated. Liz thought that the person in front of him was just a low-level officer of the Sith Empire, and his tone was a little arrogant. Oh? Since you are the direct descendant of the 6th largest family in your country, what are you doing on such a remote planet? Li Mingze narrowed his eyes. Hey, when asked this question, Liz showed a bitter smile on his face. The high-level lifespans of our civilization are very long. My father has reached more than 3,000 years old this year. This is far from his life limit. It is estimated that I will have to wait for thousands or tens of thousands of years before he dies and takes over, but even if he dies, I still have dozens of brothers and sisters, so I don't have any chance. You also saw that although our civilization has a large number of colonies, the good planets with resources and above middle-level populations are in the hands of those in power. We, the second generation, can only be allocated some remote planets. The planet that you blew up was an ecological planet that I got after much hard work. My unpopular brothers and sisters were only allocated some mining planets. Liz sighed. Oh? Do you feel deeply unfair about this? Why can those old politicians always hold good planets, while you can only be exiled to the frontier? Li Mingze said in a bewitching tone. At the same time, he glanced at the bottles of drinks that Liz had drunk. That's right, these drinks all contain the extract of star-picking wine and special materials that can react with it. Now Liz's brain has begun to be out of his control, and all kinds of secret information are blurting out. The key is that under the influence of drugs, his brain has not reacted at all, that this is a wrong situation. Yes, I am so outstanding. Why can I only stay in a remote border planet? Why can those brothers and sisters who were born earlier than me but are a bunch of trash be assigned to the administrative planet inside? At this point, Liz angrily hit the sofa. Seeing Liz's somewhat excited behavior, Li Mingze nodded with satisfaction. It seems that this second-generation official has been unable to suppress his emotions under the dual stimulation of drugs and language. Then, what if I say that our Sith Empire is willing to help you? Li Mingze's tone was full of temptation. Oh? Can you help me? Hearing this, Liz stopped hitting the sofa with his hands. Yes, with our help, you can take back those planets that should belong to you. You can even sit on the throne of your country. Li Mingze narrowed his eyes into a slit, revealing a ray of brilliance in his eyes. What price do I need to pay? Liz, who knew that there would be no free lunch, asked hurriedly. He couldn't help but become active after hearing Li Mingze's words. Instead of being redeemed and dying at home after being captured, it is better to collude with the Sith Empire and take down the throne of their country. It's very simple. We only need to get 1/3 of the star field close to our empire, and the remaining 1/3 will be the isolation zone between us. Neither side can station troops in it, but we can jointly manage the cities in the isolation zone. The remaining 1/3 will be your territory, and we will sign a non-aggression agreement for 500 years. You must know that we have contributed to this. You just need to go back and infiltrate them to provide intelligence. How about it? Li Mingze revealed a sly smile in the corner of his eyes. If someone familiar saw his eyes, they would definitely know that he had a bad idea again. This price is a bit high. Although he said so, Liz was obviously moved. Originally, if the conditions given by the Empire were very good, he would still suspect that the Empire had some conspiracy, but the Empire had already taken 1/3 of the star field and cut off another 1/3 of the isolation zone from him. This even harsh condition made him feel at ease. He had no idea of dominating the universe. He just wanted to be a superior person and enjoy life. You decide. You know, if you don't want to, we can always find someone else. Li Mingze pretended to leave, with a sneer on his face. Liz, who had not experienced many negotiations, didn't know the skill. Seeing that Li Mingze was about to leave, he hurriedly stood up and held him back. I agree. You tell me how to implement it, and how to guarantee that you won't lie to me. Liz pulled Li Mingze's arm and said hurriedly. Although this secret agreement will make their civilization lose 2/3 of its territory, no matter how little it is still his, which is better than letting others take advantage of him after he dies. Let me introduce myself again. I am the Emperor of the Sith Empire, Mingze. Mingze pressed Liss's body down and said in a deep voice. As the Emperor of the Empire, I will naturally never regret what I said. If you are willing to cooperate with us, the last 1/3 of the star field will be yours, and we will also sign a non-aggression agreement for 500 years, Mingze said to Liss with a serious expression. Okay, I believe you. Liss didn't expect that the young man in front of him was the Emperor of the Sith Empire. Although Liss was still a little worried, there was nothing he could do. He was still a prisoner of others. Even if they wanted to kill him, it would only take a word. Very good, I will arrange a big show later. You will get a chance to escape from the isolation cabin. After you escape from the isolation cabin, you will immediately find your subordinates and rescue them. At this time, the actors I prepared will block you along the way. You will kill them one by one with a rifle you have tampered with, and then come to the port of the spaceship. In the port of the spaceship, there is a cruiser I prepared for you. When the time comes, you will take your subordinates to escape on the cruiser, and defeat some of our Empire's warships on the way back. Chapter 312. The show begins. After you kill all the Imperial warships you encounter, you can drive the cruiser back to your galaxy, and you, as a person who single-handedly rescued his subordinates, defeated several Imperial warships, captured an Imperial cruiser intact, and obtained detailed information about the Imperial fleet, will become the most sought-after person in your family and a great contributor to your country. Then you can use this momentum to infiltrate your country's command structure and send us some important information. Mingze told him all the plans he had come up with, and Liss was stunned. Also, we will prepare a special contact method for you, which is also a way to ensure that you will not betray. As he spoke, Mingze took out a palm-sized portable culture tank from behind him. There was a group of black bugs swimming in the liquid in the culture tank. These bugs were the products of the Imperial Biological Laboratory, parasitic aliens. After devouring some parasites, and then undergoing genetic modulation by the Empire, the aliens were successfully reduced to such a size and had the ability to resist scanning, allowing the parasitic aliens to easily evade all inspection methods. Because their parasitic position is the human skeleton, once they enter the skeleton, they will merge with the skeleton, and even the most advanced detection instruments will not detect any abnormalities. At the same time, they can hijack nerve signals to obtain the information they want. In addition, with the quantum communication organs that can communicate with the Empire without restrictions, the Empire can receive the information they send back at any time without a trace. If Liss doesn't obey, these aliens can instantly devour his skeleton brain, which is an excellent spy tool. Should I eat them? Liss's face was a little ugly. Although they need to eat a human to perfect themselves when they evolve to adulthood, they now eat while lying in the dormant chamber, and the processed human liquid is transported into the body through the catheter, and they are in a dormant state during this process and will not feel any discomfort. Yes, eat it. Mingze nodded affirmatively, and with his right hand, he pulled out a pistol from his waist. Seeing the pistol in Mingze's hand, Liss swallowed his saliva, knowing that if he didn't eat the worm today, he would not be able to walk out of the isolation room alive. I hope you keep your word. Liss gritted his teeth, closed his eyes and drank the liquid containing the worm, but it was not as bad as he expected, but with a hint of sweetness. Don't worry, I always keep my word. Mingze put away the portable culture tank and pistol in his hand. If you have a trustworthy subordinate, you can separate a parasite from the body and feed it to him. The parasite in his body is completely obedient to you, so your plan will go more smoothly. Mingze thought of something and said to Liss. By the way, every split will consume a lot of your energy, so make sure to eat more good food. Mingze laughed twice and turned to leave the isolation room, but if you look closely, you will find that the door of the isolation room is not closed tightly. After Mingze walked out of the isolation room, the soldiers in the monitoring room put their weapons in the secret compartment and took out simulated weapons from the secret compartment. These simulated weapons can fire ammunition like normal weapons. But the ammunition will only detonate blood bags when hitting the Imperial soldiers, without causing any harm. At the same time, they also replaced the daggers on their waists with simulated daggers. These daggers, like rifles, are fake weapons that can only be seen but not used. Like the soldiers in the monitoring room, the soldiers on the entire battleship have replaced their weapons with simulated weapons for acting, and their clothes have already been installed with blood bags. A silver cruiser also stopped in the port of the Imperial Dreadnought. This cruiser has been specially modified by Tianyi. When the corruptor dismantles this battleship, the super virus she designed will take the opportunity to sneak into the computer of the corruptor civilization. This super virus, which is inspired by the special signal sent by the future Zerg, is highly contagious and concealed. Although it is not as powerful as the Zerg that can directly change the genetic structure of organisms, it can hide in the computer network of the corruptors and transmit valuable intelligence to the Empire. At critical moments, it can also play a wonderful role in turning enemies into friends. Tens of minutes later, through the code on the TV, Lys, who knew that he could start acting, quietly came to the door of the isolation room. He flashed out of the slightly opened isolation room door to the monitoring room. At this time, everyone in the monitoring room fell into deep sleep, and the only two awake were still playing cards. Lys thought that these people were just like actors. He couldn't see any flaws even though he knew the truth of the matter. After squatting and quietly coming to the side of the monitoring chair, Lys reached out and pulled out a dagger from the soldier's waist, and then he hugged the sleeping soldier's neck and cut it hard. In an instant, the dagger cut through the fake skin on the soldier's neck, and blood flowed out from the wound on the soldier's neck. Fuck, it's too real, Lys sighed, and killed all the soldiers in the room one by one, then picked up a rifle from the ground and ran out of the door. Following the guidance of the arrow on the holographic screen in the corridor, Lys successfully came to the door of the cell where his subordinates were imprisoned. After stabbing a guard soldier to death, he held the soldier's hand to open the fingerprint lock of the cell, and then held the soldier's eyes to the iris scan. Finally, as the electromagnetic card was swiped on the door, the heavy cell door opened to both sides. The group of corrupt officers who had huddled together saw Lys covered in blood, with 2 rifles across his waist, 2 pistols on his thighs, and a bloody dagger in his hand. "Sir, you?" Everyone opened their mouths in surprise. They couldn't believe that the second-generation governor, who was usually delicate and squeamish, actually had such a tough side. "I just got rid of the soldier who was guarding me. He told me that a cruiser for supply had just docked at the port of this battleship. As long as we can escape to the cruiser, we may be able to escape back to our galaxy." Lys wiped the blood on the dagger on his clothes, shocking everyone to sweat. "Sir, we will follow you." Several officers hurriedly expressed their loyalty, fearing that they would be shot in the head by their superior like the unlucky guy who was kicked off the evacuation ship. "Thank you, Saber Knight, for the 10,000 reward. I can't type outside now, I will add more when I get back." Chapter 313 Refreshing 3 Views. More than a dozen officers rescued by Lys followed him, hunched over, and groped toward the port of the spaceship. Along the way, they passed several huge pools of blood, in which several Imperial soldiers with their necks cut open were lying. "Sir, did you do all this?" an officer following Lys asked in a low voice. "Yes, because in their own spaceship, these soldiers' vigilance was too poor." Lys nodded, and received the admiring gazes of a group of officers. "You pick up their weapons, we may encounter a battle with the soldiers of the Sith Empire." Lys stopped and pointed to the assault rifles scattered on the ground. Several officers hurried forward, picked up the blood-stained rifles and wiped them on their cuffs. But after these officers put their hands on the trigger, the assault rifles in their hands suddenly sounded an alarm. "Sorry, your information has not been entered, and this weapon cannot be activated." The sudden alarm frightened several officers, and they looked around hurriedly. They found that no Imperial soldiers were attracted, and they breathed a sigh of relief. Then several officers gritted their teeth, and their original palms suddenly split apart, revealing dozens of blue tentacles in the flesh. As these tentacles extended into the rifle through the gap, the display that originally displayed a red exclamation mark turned into a green check mark. These assault rifles have been bypassed and can be used directly by the corruptors. At this time, Mingze, who was watching the scene in the monitoring room of the Crescent Dreadnought, was amazed. He originally just wanted to test whether these corruptors who did not connect their bodies to the warship still had the ability to control electronic equipment, but he didn't expect that they really did. It seems that this ability should have been recorded into their original genes, and all corruptors have this magical ability. Send the #1 performance team to encounter them, and pay attention to let Lys kill more people. Mingze waved his hand, and the officer who was listening to the order commanded 2 teams of fully armed soldiers from the room on the side to the corridor where the corruptors were. "Meet the enemy. Meet the enemy. Open fire." Seeing the Imperial soldier Lys suddenly enter the corridor, he shouted hurriedly. Without him saying anything, the officer behind him pulled him into the bunker protruding from the corridor wall, and aimed his weapon at the Imperial soldiers and opened fire. "Lys, you must show your courage. Don't worry, Our soldiers' weapons won't hit you. Li Mingze controlled the parasite in the bones near Li's brain through the controller he carried with him. The sudden voice in Li's ear startled him. He subconsciously looked around and found that the officers around him were still fighting with the Imperial soldiers nervously, so he breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that the voice came from the parasite in his body. Shaking his head, Lis decided to follow Li Mingze's advice, picked up 2 submachine guns from the side and rushed towards the location of the Imperial soldiers. "Sir, come back. Danger." A group of corrupted officers were shocked when they saw Lis rushing out of the bunker. If Lis died here, they would not be able to have a good life when they returned. Lis, who rushed out, seemed not to hear it. His body kept moving in an S shape in the rain of bullets. As his speed increased instantly, he ran from the walls on both sides of the corridor to the ceiling of the corridor. But surprisingly, in this dense rain of bullets, Lis was completely unscathed. Countless bullets passed by him, not even a hair of his was shot down. The corrupted officers hiding in the bunker had forgotten to shoot at this time, and all opened their mouths in shock as they looked at Lis, who was about to fall from the ceiling. They didn't expect that it could be like this. Their leader Lis's movement was too coquettish, and he could actually perfectly avoid the rain of bullets. But something even more surprising happened. After Lis ran to the ceiling, he turned around and did a backflip to the ground, and at the same time, he aimed the submachine gun in his hand at the Imperial soldiers below and pulled the trigger. As bullets gushed out one after another, Lis knelt on one knee after rolling around. At this time, the armor on the faces of many Imperial soldiers around him suddenly broke, and streams of blood gushed out, and their bodies fell to the ground weakly. In this way, the 2 squads of Imperial soldiers who had been fighting with the corrupted officers for several minutes were all killed by him in a few seconds. "Sir, you are awesome." The corruptor officers hiding in the bunker came out of the bunker in shock, their eyes unable to hide the admiration. You have to know that neither they nor Lis are ground combat type corruptors. They are evolving both space combat and intelligence. Their combat effectiveness in ground combat is not much different from that of the Empire's soldiers. But now Lis has refreshed their 3 views. It turns out that a commander evolution type can have such a strong combat effectiveness. The foundation of this big family is different, and the performance at the critical moment is extraordinary. Let's keep moving forward. The remaining troops of the Sith Empire should be on their way. Pick up their ammunition. We must be prepared for a hard battle. Seeing the admiring eyes of everyone, Lis felt secretly happy. The feeling of being a hero is really good. Moreover, the replenishment time of the Empire's cruiser is 50 minutes. Because it needs to replenish energy, the replenishment process cannot be paused. It's still 20 minutes before it leaves the port. We must rush over before it leaves the port. Lis raised his hand to check the time and said to the officers with a serious expression. Many officers nodded, picked up the magazines of their weapons from the ground, and continued to run forward closely behind Lis. 10 minutes later, Lis and others, who had taken a shortcut to the inner port of the dreadnought by invading the shipborne transportation station, stood in front of the ventilation duct leading to the port. Along the way, with Lis's amazing fighting skills, they easily defeated several Sith Empire teams and arrived at a current place. "You, go and invade the security panel in the ventilation duct." Lis frowned as he looked at the laser net that was constantly rotating in the ventilation duct. The officer who was pointed out had a black face, but still obeyed the order and came to the front of the ventilation duct. As the officer lay down, several blue tentacles in his palm stretched into the duct. As the blue tentacles became longer and longer, the flesh on the officer's arm became less and less, and the officer's face began to turn pale. After a few seconds, the tentacles that passed through the laser grid came to the control panel at the other end of the duct and stretched in. After a few more seconds, the laser net in the ventilation duct disappeared. Lis reached out and removed the protective net of the ventilation duct, then pulled the pale-faced officer in. Other officers followed Lis in. Chapter 314 Success. "Sir, how can we get on the cruiser?" Lis and others came to an aerial platform through the ventilation duct. An officer frowned and asked as he looked at the dozens of special warfare mechas at the entrance of the cruiser. If it were ordinary Marines, they would still have the confidence to rush into the cruiser with the help of Lis, but these special warfare mechas wearing heavy armor can compete with land-based corruptors. "We crawl in through that supply pipe." Lis looked around the port and pointed to the supply pipe that was inserted under an open armor of the cruiser. "It can only be done this way." Many officers nodded helplessly and crawled towards the mechanical arm where the supply pipe was located under Lis's leadership. Soon these officers found that because the attention of the Imperial forces was focused on the official entrance of the spacecraft, they did not notice them climbing in the remote corner. The relieved people used their hands and feet and soon came to the mechanical arm surrounding the supply pipe. Suddenly, an alarm sounded throughout the port, and white mist sprayed out from the end of the supply pipe that was inserted into the Imperial cruiser. "Hurry, this battleship is about to run out of supplies, we must speed up," Liz frowned and shouted. Upon hearing this, everyone immediately jumped onto the mechanical arm and ran towards the cruiser. Because of the excessive force, the heavy sound of landing startled the special warfare mechas at the main entrance of the spacecraft. Even hundreds of crew members who were preparing to board the ship took out their weapons and ran towards their location. Liz and others were getting faster and faster. After a few seconds, they jumped off the mechanical arm and fell into the cruiser. "Hurry, invade this cruiser, close the entrance, and don't let these soldiers enter the battleship." Looking back at the mechanical arm that was withdrawing the port platform, Liz pointed at the control console and shouted. More than a dozen officers rushed over and stretched out their blue tentacles towards the control console. Based on the principle of strength in numbers, all officers began to invade the various terminals of the cruiser together. After a short while, the cruiser's access control system was breached by them, and the cruiser's door was tightly closed with a bang, and the deck on the port was slowly retracted. The crew of the Imperial cruiser abandoned in the port looked at the closed cruiser door with anger in their eyes. "Quick, quick, enter the bridge immediately and invade the various subsystems of this warship." Liz waved his hand to open the door that had been controlled by them, and ran towards the bridge of the cruiser. A few minutes later, many officers who came to the bridge of the cruiser stretched out blue tentacles to the control console in front of them. The cruiser's life support system, reactor system, and other subsystems fell one after another and fell into the control of the corrupted officers. "Leave the driving system and weapons system to me, and you can take care of other systems," Liz, who heard Li Mingze's command, said to the officers. The officers who were trying to control the warship had no doubt that Liz was their superior, and what he said was of course what it was. With the help of the shipboard intelligence, Liz, who took over the battleship's driving and weapon attack systems, quickly mastered the two subsystems of the spacecraft. With a huge mechanical sound, the cruiser's propeller suddenly ejected a blue flame, pushing the cruiser forward a short distance. "Ahem, I just took over and I'm not familiar with it yet." Looking at the people who were looking at him, Liz explained awkwardly. Turning around, Liz, who was back in control, controlled the cruiser to gently draw an arc in the port and turned around to fly towards the entrance of the dreadnought port. "Sir, the people of the Sith Empire are closing the gate. We must rush over as soon as possible." An officer pointed at the gate that was slowly closing in the distance and shouted. Liz certainly knew that the speed of the gate's descent was actually calculated precisely, and at their current speed, they would just be able to rush over. "Stand firm. Let's speed up," Liz shouted and controlled the cruiser to accelerate suddenly, rushing towards the closing port entrance. As the cruiser got closer and closer to the gate, everyone saw that the gap between the upper and lower gates was getting smaller and smaller. It's bad. Because Liz just took control of the warship, the flight trajectory has deviated. "Our gate is falling too fast," a soldier next to Li Mingze suddenly looked up and said. "I believe he can solve it himself." Li Mingze shook his head. From Liz's small actions and his realistic acting skills, we can know that this man is really a piece of better gold. Liz has already found something wrong at this time, and his eyebrows frowned. "Throw away all unnecessary weights." Immediately, he thought of something and decisively ordered the officer next to him. As soon as he finished speaking, the cargo hold door and hangar door on the cruiser opened to both sides, and huge containers were ejected from the cruiser. The drones and fighters in the hangar were also ejected by the launcher, followed by the landing cabin and armored vehicles carried by the cruiser. The cruiser, which was emptied of its weight, instantly became much lighter, and its speed suddenly increased by nearly 10%. With a sharp metal friction sound, the cruiser barely passed through the middle of the two doors, and the armor on both sides of the warship was rubbed out with huge sparks. After breaking through the energy membrane that prevented gas leakage, the cruiser came to Purple World. "Yet, we escaped," a group of officers in the bridge of the cruiser shouted excitedly. "Don't be happy so early. We have to break out of the Imperial fleet and leave the hyperspace to be considered as escaping." Liz frowned and suppressed the cheers in the bridge. Many officers nodded in agreement and continued to devote their energy to the control of the battleship. "Sir, The secondary guns of the Crescent battleship are adjusting their direction to aim at us. An officer enlarged the picture of the Crescent dreadnought behind the cruiser in front of everyone. Damn it, Liz controlled the cruiser to dive and rush towards a battleship not far away. Just when many officers were puzzled by the meaning of Liz's move, Liz controlled the cruiser to dive and flew from the back of the battleship to the lower part of the battleship. At this time, the secondary weapons of the Imperial dreadnought had been fired, and dozens of huge beams of light hit the Imperial battleship that Liz used as a shield. With a huge burst of sparks, the battleship was cut into several pieces by the secondary guns of the dreadnought, and shattered into pieces of debris in the violent explosion. Okay, let's jump out of hyperspace. Liz listened to Li Mingze's instructions and pressed the hyperspace button on the cruiser. Chapter 315 Leaving. The hyperspace engine still needs 10 minutes of cooling time. An officer looked at the screen in front of him and broke out in a cold sweat. It still takes so long. Liz frowned and controlled the cruiser to start shuttling among the warships of the Imperial fleet. Release the prop cruiser. Li Mingze waved his hand in the flagship control room. Several cruisers similar to the warships that Liz and others were riding on drilled into the interior from one side of the fleet and soon came to the cruiser of Liz and others. Damn, the Imperial cruiser has caught up with us, the officer in charge of the warship radar module shouted anxiously. At this moment, the bow of the ship drops 35 degrees and fires. Liz's command suddenly appeared in his mind. Liz instinctively controlled the cruiser to lean forward, and at the same time, the main gun on the warship that had already been charged also fired dozens of shells at the front. At this time, an Imperial cruiser happened to pass by here, and the shells of Liz's warship tore through the shield of the cruiser and smashed the shells into the thrusters of the Imperial cruiser. As the propeller of the Imperial cruiser hit by Liz flashed countless small explosions, a violent explosion engulfed the entire cruiser. Well done, the officers in Liz's battleship excitedly waved their fists. They didn't expect that their superiors had such a high talent in battleship driving. Roll left and move 3 ship bodies laterally. Following Li Mingze's order, Liz controlled the battleship and suddenly rolled to the left 3 times. Countless shells flew over the position where Liz's battleship was just now, tearing the shield of a battleship apart. In order to prevent accidental injuries again, all battleships only had close-range artillery to fire at Liz's cruiser. However, the power of these weapons was too low, and the equally flexible cruisers were mainly responsible for attacking them. Beautiful, a group of corrupted officers who had just recovered from dizziness shouted. They were almost buried under the artillery fire of the Imperial fleet. They were only half a ship away from the nearest ship position, the space occupied by a warship horizontally or vertically, dash upward for 5,000 meters, bypass the battleship in front from the left, and then fire the secondary guns. Liz heard Li Mingze's voice again. Hearing this, Liz controlled the cruiser to rush upward for 5,000 meters, rolled to the left to avoid a battleship that almost hit it, and then slightly accelerated to bypass the battleship from the left side. After seeing the Imperial cruiser that suddenly appeared in front of him, Liz suddenly fired all the secondary gun shells at the cruiser. At this time, the Imperial cruiser in front of them also fired dozens of high-energy torpedoes at them. Countless shells hit the high-energy torpedoes fired by the Empire, detonating all the energy crystals stored in the torpedoes. The huge explosion caused by the torpedo blew away the shield of the cruiser that fired the torpedo, and the remaining secondary gun shells passed through the flash produced by the explosion and hit the armor of the cruiser. Basically, all the shells were blocked by the cruiser's hard armor, but several of them happened to pass through the torpedo launcher that was about to be closed. With a series of violent explosions, the Imperial cruiser that had just launched a torpedo was blown into 3 sections. And the lights on the ship gradually went out. The officers in Liz's warship looked at Liz with shock. In their eyes, this once domineering second-generation governor had become a godlike existence. Sir, you are really, really amazing. It is our honor to work under you. In the corrupt society that advocates strength, strong people like Liz are undoubtedly the most admired. Looking at the officers' admiring expressions, Liz felt how correct his decision was at this moment. With the help of the Empire, he could easily achieve achievements that he had never dared to think of before, and gain the respect of everyone, and he would get more in the future, including the power and territory he had always dreamed of. There was nothing to say. At this moment, he felt that agreeing to become a traitor who cooperated with the Empire from inside and outside was the wisest decision of his life. See those destroyers ahead? Fire all the missiles and torpedoes on your warships. Mingze's voice rang in Lys's ears again. Sure enough, not far ahead of them, there was a small fleet of 5 Imperial arsenal destroyers. Lys did not hesitate at all and decisively fired all the torpedoes and missiles on the 5 warships. You can leave now. Start the hyperspace. With a burst of violent explosions, Lys received the last communication from Mingze. Sir, our hyperspace engine has been fully charged. Should we jump out of the hyperspace? The officer in charge of the hyperspace engine module suddenly shouted. Let's go. Lys nodded and looked back at the location of the Imperial flagship. After a flash of lightning, the cruiser captured by Lys and others disappeared in the hyperspace. The wreckage area of the warship that was originally destroyed by Lys and others' warships suddenly began to show unusual fluctuations. With a wave of ripples like water waves, the wreckage in the hyperspace disappeared, and the intact warships appeared in the original place. That's right, because all external observations of warships now need to rely on sensors on the spacecraft and the vision of the driver. Based on this, the Empire specially modified the cruiser used for acting from the hardware aspect. After 3 hours of modification, all external observation modules in the cruiser driven by Lys were tampered with. The weapon launch and explosion simulated by the super-large holographic image, combined with the data sent back by the spacecraft sensor, made Lys and others in the warship think that they were really firing and shot down the Empire's warship. They didn't know that what they saw was just a battle scene simulated by the holographic image, and the energy explosion and radiation data received by the sensor were all tampered with by the Empire. When they drove the warship back to their star field, these tampered by the Empire would self-destruct to ensure that the corruptors would not find any abnormalities. In the Crescent Dreadnought, after Lys and others escaped from the Dreadnought, the soldiers who had fallen in a pool of blood also stood up and moved their stiff bodies. The soldier whose head was blown up also took out the plastic model from his helmet, and the model still had blood from the blood bag. Your Majesty, Lys has already left the hyperspace in his cruiser and is expected to return to their star field in 2 days. By then, we will be able to receive confidential information from them. An officer respectfully stood behind Mingze and reported. Mingze nodded, raised his glass, looked at the purple world outside the window and took a sip. Chapter 316 Return. 2 days later, in a star system controlled by the corruptors, a silver cruiser suddenly appeared in the starry sky. Sir, we are back, a group of officers cheered from the battleship's bridge. We are going home, Lys nodded, with an inexplicable look in his eyes. Planetary Orbital Space Station A081 received a reply. I am Major General Lys, the governor of planet A071. This is the cruiser of the Sith Empire that we hijacked. Lys used the cruiser's communicator to send a message to the distant Planetary Orbital Space Station. The officers in the control room of the space station, who were deploying weapons, were stunned when they heard the news of the invasion of an unknown warship. Did the Border Fleet report 2 days ago that the governor of A071, Lys, had been abducted by the Empire's fleet? How come he is back now? Unidentified warship, we cannot confirm your identity. Please shut down the thrusters and weapons systems and wait in place. For the sake of caution, the command room of the space station still issued a warning to the warship that claimed to be its own. You have to know that the Sith Empire is extremely insidious. No one knows what tricks they will use. What if this battleship enters the space station and then explodes? With the nature of the Sith Empire, they will definitely do such a thing. After receiving the warning, Lys and a group of officers restrained their excitement and controlled the cruiser to shut down the thrusters. The gun muzzles that were originally standing upright were also put under the armor. 20 hours later, a small fleet consisting of 10 corruptor frigates and 2 corruptor destroyers arrived next to Lys's cruiser. Hundreds of tentacles stretched out from the squadron's spaceship and tightly wrapped around the cruiser where Lys was. Then these tentacles began to deform, and small blue tentacles stretched out from the tentacles and infiltrated into the Empire's cruiser. Tens of minutes later, the cruiser had completely fallen into the control of the corruptor fleet. More than a dozen spaceships that were originally entangled with the cruiser retracted their tentacles, leaving only one destroyer's tentacles still entangled with the Empire's cruiser. As the corruptor warships ignited one after another, the destroyer controlled the Imperial cruiser beside it and began to fly towards the space station. After arriving at the port of the orbital space station above the planet A081, several tentacles stretched out from the port to fix the cruiser on the berth. A burst of exhaust sound was heard, and the deck of the cruiser was lowered to the port platform of the space station, and the airlock door behind the deck slowly opened to both sides. Under the eyes of a group of land-based corruptors, Liss and his more than 10 officers walked down the Imperial cruiser. "Welcome, Major General Liss." After confirming Liss's identity, the expression of the officer who originally came to escort him changed instantly, and a flattering smile appeared on his face. "Your father just contacted our governor and wanted to know your condition. We knew that nothing would happen to you." The officer stood behind Liss flatteringly and followed Liss forward. "Where is the governor of your planet?" "I need to contact my father for important matters." Liss frowned slightly when he saw that there was no governor of this planet around. "Our governor is on his way. Look, he's here." A black extended hovercraft suddenly stopped on the road, far away from the airport. A fat man rolled down from the car and ran to Liss. "Master Liss, you don't recognize me. We met once at your father's birthday party." The governor, who was about to become fat, was full of smiles on his face. "Well, I remember, but now is not the time to chat. I just escaped from the Empire's fleet. I need to have a good rest." Liss's face was a little ugly. Okay, follow me." The governor hurriedly took Liss to the hovercraft and flew away. The many officers left in the port were arranged to go to the military department to explain what happened after they evacuated from the planet. A few days later, Liss followed the fat governor to the holographic communication room of the governor mansion. As the holographic screen in the holographic communication lit up, the figure of Liss's father appeared on the holographic screen. A middle-aged man with a ferocious face appeared in front of Liss. There were several bullet marks on his face, which added a fierce aura to the whole person. This man was the commander of the first fleet of the corruptor civilization, Admiral Levi. "Hello, father." Liss lowered his head immediately after seeing his father. "Ha, good son, you did a good job. I heard that after you were caught by the Imperial fleet, you not only escaped from the interrogation room, but also rescued your subordinates. In the end, you stole an Imperial cruiser and sank a battleship, 2 cruisers and 5 destroyers of the Sith Empire. This is a great military exploit." Liss's father touched his beard with satisfaction, his eyes full of relief. "You know, in the years of war with the Empire, you can't count the number of such military exploits on one hand. These are all luck. Liss pretended to be embarrassed and lowered his head. "Modest. You are too modest. You should know that you not only sank so many warships of the Sith Empire, but also stole a complete cruiser. With this cruiser, we can conduct in-depth analysis and find the weaknesses of the Sith Empire fleet. Then the small Sith Empire will not be a concern." Liss's father laughed loudly, and it seemed that he was very satisfied with his son's performance. However, if he knew that this cruiser was just the first generation of the Empire's cruiser that had not been upgraded, and the important equipment had been removed, and the armor and internal structure were a decoy version that had been fine-tuned, I wonder if he would still laugh. "This is what I should do for the country." Liss hesitated and wanted to say something, but he didn't say it, but stood up and saluted. Very good. You are worthy of being my son Levi. I will apply to the head of state for a reward for you, and this reward is absolutely generous." Levi laughed and turned off the holographic image. Liss sighed, walked down from the dialogue table, and walked towards the door. The fat governor on the side hurriedly caught up. "Master Liss, you are going to be promoted. When that happens, you will be someone that we, the small border governors, need to look up to. Congratulations." "Congratulations." The fat governor hurriedly flattered Liss before he was promoted, otherwise he would have no chance. "Yes." Liss nodded coldly and walked towards his room. "I will remember you. If you are not satisfied with your current status and treatment, come to my room at night." Liss suddenly thought of something and turned around and said, Okay. The fat governor thought that Liss was going to promote him, and hurriedly responded happily. Chapter 317 Development of Downline. However, the fat governor was stunned. This Liss wouldn't have any special hobbies, otherwise why would he be allowed to go to his room at night? "Let's go." The fat governor thought that there was no place to eat in this place, and the women among the low-level pie people were ugly. The tax revenue he could get was pitiful. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. That night, Liss was standing quietly in front of the window, shaking a glass of red wine in his hand. He would think about it at night, thinking about whether he was right to do this, and whether it was worth it to betray his race and country like this. Beep, beep, the doorbell rang, pulling Liss back from his thinking. There is no way out, I can only go all the way to the end. Liss gritted his teeth and turned to walk towards the door. As the door opened, a round figure appeared in front of Liss. Master Liss, good evening. The fat governor squeezed out an ugly smile on his face. He looked at Liss in his pajamas and felt that his reputation was about to be lost. Come on, come in and talk. Liss stuck his head out, looked around the door of the room, and after making sure that no one was there, he closed the door and locked it. The fat governor's heart jumped suddenly. Could this be? How do you feel about your current position? Do you want a better life? Liss sat opposite the fat governor, took a sip of the red wine in his hand and said slowly, I want a higher position. More food. More beauties and more money. A fanatical expression appeared on the fat governor's face. Good. Liss was very happy. He was not afraid of such people who had a strong desire for money and status. He was afraid that this person was too noble. I can give you more money, more beauties, and a higher status. But what can you give? Liss took another sip of red wine with an expressionless face. I am willing to do anything. I am willing to give everything, the fat governor shouted, and his hand slowly reached for the buttons of his clothes. Very good, if you are willing to be my loyal dog. I will give you the status and money you dare not think of. Liss's eyes revealed a gleam of brilliance. Could it be? Could it be? The fat governor was shocked. This young Master Liss had such a hobby that he actually let him be a dog. If you are willing to become my subordinate, we will be on the same path in the future. The higher my position, the more you will get. Liss narrowed his eyes. The fat governor realized that this dog was not a dog. This young Master Liss was planning to enrich his wings and win him over. I do, the fat governor shouted hurriedly. Liss nodded with satisfaction and took out a disc-shaped mechanical creation from behind. As he put the disc on the table between the two of them, a circle of ripples suddenly appeared in the air around the disc. This disc is the Imperial technology creation that Mingze gave to Liss. It has only one function, which is to shield the surrounding eavesdropping devices and cameras, prevent the sound of conversation from being transmitted, and prevent the wall from having ears. You have to think clearly. If you choose to follow me, you will end up being an enemy of the head of state, my father, and all the officers, but the final throne will eventually belong to me. And as the first person to join me, you will gain a high status and countless wealth. Liss' words were full of temptation. The fat governor fell into deep thought after hearing this. But the two of us can't possibly fight against the entire country's top leaders. We don't even have a fleet. The fat governor's face was full of bitterness. He didn't expect that Liss was so arrogant and bold enough to challenge the entire country's top leaders alone. I'm not alone. I have the Sith Empire behind me, Liss said, staring at the fat governor, and his hand behind his back had quietly placed on the gun handle. The fat governor's breathing suddenly tightened when he heard this, and cold sweat instantly flowed down. You defected to the Sith Empire. The fat governor couldn't believe it. Yes, although we will lose 1/3 of the territory in the end, what we get in return is the throne to rule the entire country. Liss crossed his legs and took out the pistol behind him and placed it beside his legs. Gulp. The fat governor stared at Liss's gun and swallowed hard. He felt that if he didn't agree, he would probably die here today. Let's fight. The fat governor gritted his teeth. Meet the head of state. The fat governor raised his hands diagonally upward and shouted. Very good, you know the situation. Liss nodded with satisfaction. The fat governor hurriedly laughed harmlessly. On one side was a dead end, and on the other side was a chance to become a superior person. Smart people knew which one to choose. Come on, swallow it. Liss took out a small black insect from his pocket. The insect was crawling happily on his palm. The fat governor looked a little ugly. Don't worry, it's just a way to prevent you from rebelling. If you follow me well, it will never hurt you in this life. Liss showed a wolf grandmother smile at the corner of his mouth. I ate it. The fat governor made up his mind and grabbed the small insect and put it in his mouth. Don't chew it. Liss saw that the fat governor seemed to want to taste it, and hurriedly shouted. The fat governor smiled awkwardly and swallowed a worm into his stomach. With a burst of pain, the parasitic alien that entered the fat governor's stomach drilled into his spine and began to slowly reproduce. Very good, from now on you are one of us. What is your real name? Liss nodded with satisfaction and patted the fat governor on the shoulder. Sir, my name is Lida, the fat governor hurriedly replied. Lida, right? From now on, our base camp will be placed on your planet. When I mix into the military high level, we will be waiting for wealth and glory. Liss straightened Lida's collar and turned to walk into his bedroom. Good night, sir. Lida stretched his head and shouted, then turned and left Liss's room and walked towards his own mansion. A few days later, A huge corruptor destroyer fell from the sky, and several officers walked out of the destroyer and came to Liss, who was waiting on the side. Major General Liss, we are the special envoys sent by the military. Your military exploits have been recognized by the Führer. You have been promoted to Lieutenant General. A new fleet, the 6th Expeditionary Fleet, has been allocated to you. You will be the commander of this fleet in the future. The Führer has also given you an administrative star near the capital star zone. You can go and receive it, the special envoy of the military said respectfully. Now Liss's performance in the Dreadnought and the video of driving the battleship to destroy the Sith battleship have spread among the corruptor civilization. The protagonist Liss in the video naturally became the idol of the corruptors who worship the strong. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318, Choice. Long live the Führer, Liss hurriedly saluted and thanked him. Several officers also made way for Liss to enter the spaceship. Lieutenant General Liss, please come in. Several officers bowed and made a gesture of invitation. Lieutenant General Liss is now one level higher than them in rank, and there is a broad space for growth in the future. They dare not neglect him. Liss nodded and walked into the destroyer, with a flash of light in his eyes. More than 10 days later, on the outskirts of the corruptor's capital star system, a destroyer appeared in the starry sky under the escort of a frigate. Several destroyers that had been waiting for a long time to welcome Liss came up and accompanied Liss's spaceship. In the next few days, Liss was cordially received by the Führer on the capital star and took over the 6th Expeditionary Fleet. At this time, knowing that Liss had successfully infiltrated the high-level military of the corruptor, Mingze decided that it was time to come out for a walk. In the asteroid belt of a remote star system in the corruptor star field, tens of thousands of huge asteroids located in various parts of the asteroid belt suddenly began to flash. Then countless warships appeared where the asteroids were originally located. With the start of the tail thrusters of the spacecraft, tens of thousands of warships slowly sailed towards the outer edge of the star system. Liss, who is already the commander-in-chief of the 6th Fleet, also received orders from his superiors to cooperate with the other 5 fleets to search for traces of the Sith Empire fleet in their star field. This arrangement was exactly what Mingze wanted. After Liss also joined the encirclement and suppression, the locations of all fleets participating in the encirclement and suppression were known to the Imperial Fleet. The Imperial Fleet also knew the locations of various fortresses and traps in the corruptor star field. As long as they bypassed these dangerous star fields, the corruptor's encirclement and suppression fleet would never be able to find the Imperial Fleet. The Imperial Fleet is now shuttling through the corruptor star field like a ghost. Your Majesty, ahead is an undefended star system of the corruptors. It will take the nearest encirclement fleet 5 days to reach here, which is more than enough for us, in front of a red and gray planet, an officer said respectfully to Mingze. Conduct orbital bombardment directly. After clearing this planet, we will continue to the next target. Mingze nodded and pressed the red button on the console fiercely. A few hours later, a shell shot out from the Crescent Dreadnought and flew towards the planet in front of the fleet. Just like the first planet attacked, after the shell drilled into the ground, a large bubble instantly bulged on the ground, and then the lava bubble burst, and a circular lava wall spread out in all directions. Okay, let's move on. Mingze waved his hand. He didn't care about the fate of this planet at all. Its fate was doomed when he pressed the button. Accompanied by a flash of lightning, the Empire's fleet disappeared on the periphery of the star system. It was not until 5 days later that the Corruptor's 5th Fleet arrived at this star system. Looking at the colony that had turned into a lava planet, the commander of the fleet gnashed his teeth in anger. This planet is our 162nd colony, with a population of 13 million. All civilians are dead. And the planet's governor has returned to the capital planet on an evacuation ship. A holographic projection appeared in front of the fleet commander. This is the second colony we have lost. I didn't expect the people of the Sith Empire to be so ruthless. They must not be forgiven. We will continue to chase. The commander's eyes flashed with anger. Half a month passed, and after losing 2 colonies again, the head of the Corruptor was finally enraged and summoned the commanders of the 8 fleets to the military headquarters of the capital planet. We can't go on like this. 4 of our colonies have been destroyed by the Empire's fleet. If we continue like this, the loss of our manpower will be immeasurable. The head of the corruptor sat in the center of the conference hall, his black robe covering his body in the shadows. The dark face was also hidden under the hood, and no one could see his face clearly, but the pressure emanating from his body allowed many corrupted officers to clearly feel the power gap between them. Master, why don't we leave only 3 fleets to encircle the fleet of the Sith Empire, and the remaining 5 fleets go to the star field of the Sith Empire to eradicate their foundation? In this way, the Sith Empire fleet that has lost its foundation will definitely lose its support completely. The supplies they carry will be exhausted sooner or later, and then we can easily crush them to death. An officer stretched out his hand and made a vicious crushing gesture. At this time, Lys, who was sitting at the bottom of the conference table, suddenly shrank his pupils, but his facial expression did not change. He continued to listen to the discussion in silence. Okay. Very good. The 4th fleet to the 8th fleet will all go to the border to assemble. Your mission is to eradicate all the colonies of the Sith Empire. After the head of state said this, he stood up and left the conference room. Yes, Lys and other fleet commanders hurriedly stood up and shouted. Just after everyone got up and left, Lys hurried back to his flagship. After closing the door of the room, Lys could no longer remain calm, and a trace of panic appeared on his face. Your Majesty, His Majesty the Emperor of Sith, can you receive it? Lys called out anxiously in his mind. After receiving the keyword Sith, the parasitic alien immediately contacted the Sith Empire. I'm here, what's the matter? Mingze's voice appeared in Lys' mind. Your Majesty, something bad has happened. Our leader has decided to send 5 expeditionary forces to destroy all the colonies and capital stars of the Empire, so that you will lose your foundation and cannot obtain resource supplies. Lys hurriedly told Mingze the contents of the meeting. It must be that we went too far and angered them. They would rather let us attack their colonies first than destroy us. Mingze frowned slightly. Although the Empire's material transmission transfer station has been completed, the fortress located on the path point of the corruptor to the Empire's star field has also been built. However, it is still unknown how long the completed fortresses can stop the 5 fleets of the corruptor. You have to know that the strength of the last wave of corruptor expeditionary fleet was only 2/3 of the strength of the fleet sent now. Last time, the new commander of the corruptor fleet gave in and ran away with half of the remaining warships. This time, he won't be so lucky. If this joint fleet reaches the Empire's ring world, the losses caused will be unacceptable to Mingze. Chapter 319, Secret Pass. Your Majesty, what should we do? Qiuai and others beside Mingze looked a little ugly. Although the 3 fleets left by the corruptors are all main fleets, their single fleet is not our opponent. Even if they join forces, they are still not our opponent. We just need to seize the opportunity to defeat them one by one and break into the capital star of the corruptors. When we threaten their command level, their fleet will definitely withdraw. I estimate that even if their capital star is only threatened, their expeditionary fleet will turn back. Mingze touched his chin and pondered for a moment. Your Majesty, why don't we take the opportunity to capture the capital star of the corruptors, and then support Lys to take the throne? An officer suddenly interrupted. Oh? Sure, after we support Lys to take the throne, we will use him. Mingze smiled sinisterly and told Qiuai and others his plan. Your Majesty is brilliant, Your Majesty is brilliant. After hearing Mingze's plan, everyone couldn't help but applaud and exclaimed. A few days later, the Empire's fleet arrived at a safe passage marked by Lys. After passing through this patrol-blind spot, the Empire's fleet will be able to reach the periphery of the corruptor civilization's capital circle. Wait, Mingze suddenly thought of something and stopped the officer in charge of the hyperspace engine before the fleet was about to jump into hyperspace. Something is wrong. Imagine, when we are building the defense of the capital circle, how could we leave a blind spot? Not to mention the corruptor, an interstellar civilization that has existed for so long. Mingze frowned and thought. Your Majesty, I'm afraid that Lys has a different mind, Qiuai reminded carefully. Yes, this so-called passage is very likely a trap, Mingze punched. But if we don't take this passage, how can we break into the corruptor capital circle? If we are entangled by the corruptor's fortress, once the 3 fleets meet, we will lose our advantage, and we may even be annihilated here, not to mention threatening the corruptor's capital circle, Qiuai muttered to herself. 2 dreadnoughts will be separated to form a group, and the remaining warships will form the second group. I will lead the 2 dreadnoughts of the first group to launch a surprise attack on a siege fleet. When the attention of the other two fleets is attracted by us, the second team will immediately enter the capital circle of the corruptors through this channel. Mingze thought of such a solution. Although the two dreadnoughts may be surrounded in this way, it should not be a problem to escape by force with the weapons and shields of the two dreadnoughts. Yes, the commanders of several Imperial fleets received the order and led all the ordinary warships into the channel, while the two dreadnoughts flew in another direction under the command of Mingze. A desolate galaxy. A huge siege fleet of the corruptors appeared in the starry sky of this galaxy with lightning. A huge star map floated in front of the fleet commander. If Mingze was here at this time, he would definitely recognize that the endpoint of this fleet was the patrol blind spot that list left for Mingze and others. If the Imperial fleet enters rashly, it will encounter at least one fleet of the corruptors, and the other two fleets that are slightly further away will also be able to arrive before the end of the battle. Although this refueling tactic will eventually destroy these three corruptor fleets under the guns of the Imperial fleet. But the Imperial fleet will definitely not be much better off, and its strength will definitely be greatly reduced. This is exactly what Lys wants. By reducing the strength of the Imperial fleet, he will have the opportunity to get rid of the parasitic aliens in the end, and then he can easily solve the Sith Empire. At that time, not only will he not lose his territory, but he will also be able to solve the enemy of their civilization. What a perfect plan, but unfortunately he met the suspicious Mingze. He believed that pie in the sky would not fall from the sky and easily saw through Lys's trap. Just as this corruptor encirclement fleet was heading to the other side of the galaxy, preparing to jump into hyperspace to the next star system, two dreadnoughts appeared silently behind this fleet. The hyperspace wave shielding device from the Singer civilization completely concealed the traces of the two dreadnoughts, and the flying corruptor fleet was unaware of it. However, when their radar scanned the rear of the fleet, two huge shadows still caused the corruptor's onboard computer to sound an alarm. Unfortunately, it was too late at this time. Mingze had already ordered the two dreadnoughts to charge their main guns. Crescent, fire your main guns. Michigan, then aim at the Crescent's shells and fire your main guns. Mingze ordered Tianyi, who was standing aside. Yes, sir, Tianyi nodded, and the supercomputer on the Crescent began to run frantically, calculating the interval between the main guns of the two dreadnoughts and the encounter orbit. Crescent aimed at the distant corruptor fleet and fired a mass acceleration shell. A battleship heavy shell shot towards the corruptor fleet, and at this time, the gravity cannon on the Michigan also aimed at the corruptor fleet and fired a gravity shell. The two shells flew towards the corruptor fleet one after the other, but the speed of the red gravity shell behind was obviously much faster than the shell of Crescent. When the main gun shells of the Crescent reached the corruptor fleet, the gravity shells of the Michigan had already caught up and collided with the shells of the main guns of the Crescent. After encountering such a large mass object, the power of the gravity cannon shells was instantly released, and the energy level and speed of the released gravitational waves were instantly enhanced, sucking several corruptor destroyers that did not react into the sphere in the middle. As more and more ships were captured by gravity, the range of the gravitational waves became larger and larger. However, after having the reaction time, the warships on the periphery of the corruptor fleet instantly accelerated and dispersed in all directions. The spread of the gravitational waves was ultimately not faster than the engines of the corruptor warships. After spreading a certain distance, it lost its strength and stopped expanding. But this was enough. Half of the warships of the entire corruptor fleet had been attracted by the gravity cannon. This half of the warships had been stuck together and turned into a huge black ball of flesh and blood. Dreadnought, move closer. Crescent's secondary guns fire. Mingze was not too excited. It was too early to be happy now. The other two corruptor fleets should have received the news and were rushing here. He had to make a quick decision. After receiving the order, the Crescent dreadnought accelerated and rushed towards the regrouped corruptor fleet. At the same time, 6 huge spheres floated out of its body. I can only go back on the 23rd night. Wait for me to go back and update more. Laughing to death. Chapter 320 Trap. 6 thick beams of light swept from the turrets of the Crescent towards the corruptor fleet, and the warships that were swept were evaporated into gas. The warships that were not swept fired shells at the Crescent that rushed into their formation. However, because the shield of the Crescent was too strong, a round of salvos only knocked off 2/3 of the Crescent's shield. Crescent, withdraw. Michigan, advance. Secondary guns fire. Mingze saw that the shield of the Crescent might be broken the next time it was attacked, and hurriedly ordered the Michigan to press forward. However, because there were too many corruptor warships, the Crescent was surrounded in the middle with the Michigan before it escaped. Now, after seeing the corruptor warships being fooled, Li Mingze showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. As he thought, tens of thousands of drones of the previous generation of civilization flew out from the warehouses of Michigan and Crescent, rushing towards the corruptor warships surrounded by 2 dreadnoughts. Before the corruptor warships could react, the repair drones that rushed out had already sunk into the bodies of these corruptor warships. After a few seconds, the drones that had cut off the corruptor pilots from the inside rushed out from the rear of the warships again and continued to fly towards other warships. With the precise assistance of Tianyi, none of the drones' attack targets were repeated. Accompanied by the secondary beam cannons of the Crescent and the mass acceleration cannons on the Michigan, the drones danced in the corruptor fleet. Until dozens of minutes passed, the corruptor warships that were originally flashing with a little light dimmed one after another, and the entire battlefield seemed to be silent. With the last shell fired, the Michigan and the Crescent stopped shooting, and the drones that flew out also slowly returned to the cargo holds of the 2 dreadnoughts. At this time, all the corruptor warships on the battlefield began to float in space in disorder, and they had obviously been scrapped and turned into a pile of space junk. The energy of the repair drones has reached a bottom, and we can't continue to use them, Tianyi reported to Li Mingze. Got it. Order our own drones to push these warships together. We are ready to retreat, Li Mingze nodded. Now the shells prepared on the Crescent have been fired. It will take a lot of time to remanufacture them through the manufacturing equipment. The secondary gun ammunition on the Michigan is also almost exhausted. Now the combat effectiveness of the 2 dreadnoughts is very low and can no longer support the next battle. Calculate the location where the other 2 groups of corruptor fleets will appear. Li Mingze suddenly thought of something and hurriedly ordered Tianyi. The location has been calculated and marked on the star map. After a few seconds, Tianyi opened his closed eyes. Calculate the orbits of their 2 points to evacuation point, and the maximum impact range of the gravity cannon. Li Mingze's eyes flashed with a gleam of light. You want? Tianyi's eyes also lit up. That's right. Order the Crescent and Michigan to push the wreckage of the corruptor warships gathered together to the path they must take to chase us. Li Mingze pointed to a coordinate point in the star map and said. 10 hours later, the 2 dreadnoughts and drones that received the order worked together to push the piled wreckage toward the starry sky ahead. As they stopped, the wreckage slowly drifted away by inertia. A few days later, 2 huge corruptor siege fleets appeared in this galaxy. After the first fleet lost contact, they thought they would definitely not be able to catch up with the Empire's fleet, but they didn't expect that the Empire's fleet had not left yet. Although there are only 2 dreadnoughts left now, being able to eliminate these 2 dreadnoughts is also a great weakening of the Empire's fleet's combat effectiveness. You know, it was basically 2 dreadnoughts that were at work in several battles. It's those 2 warships. They have suffered a lot of injuries, and their hyperspace engines should have been damaged. Let's speed up and chase them. We can't let them get away, the commander of the 2nd Fleet shouted to the commander of the 3rd Fleet. The commander of the 3rd Fleet took a look at the 2 Empire dreadnoughts with scars all over the hull and flashes of lightning from time to time in some hulls, and nodded heavily. Of course, they would not guess that this was the Empire's own disguise. How could they attract the enemy to be fooled if they did not show their weakness? Li Mingze's guess was correct. The 2 corruptor commanders who were confident in the strength of their fleet thought that after a decisive battle with one of their fleets, how could the Empire's warships not be injured? Although the injuries of the 2 warships in front of them were not serious or fatal, they affected the actions of the 2 warships. This was extremely close to the estimated losses in their hearts, so they planned to make an extra effort to keep the 2 dreadnoughts here. Seeing that the corruptor fleet rushed towards his 2 dreadnoughts as expected, Li Mingze could not help but clap his hands in joy. He had been prepared for the enemy not to be fooled, but he did not expect these corruptors to cooperate so well that he felt embarrassed not to trick them. Michigan, gravity cannon, ready. Li Mingze raised his hand high in the air, waiting for the opportunity. When the 2 corruptor fleets passed by the wreckage of the 1st Fleet, Li Mingze swung his hand down. Fire! As he shouted, a red ball in the Michigan's gravity cannon flew towards the wreckage of the corruptor 1st Fleet. Seeing the red ball flying towards them, the 2 corruptors realized something was wrong. After they turned their heads and looked at the huge wreckage in the center of the 2 fleets, they couldn't help but shout in a hurry. Disperse! All warships dispersed to the 4 sides. The corruptor warships that reacted turned around and scattered to the surroundings, but at this time the gravity shells had already hit the huge wreckage. After the red light ball came into contact with a huge mass of the wreckage, the scattered gravitational waves instantly increased, pulling the surrounding corruptor warships towards the center. The wreckage of the warships in the center also formed a huge sphere under gravity. Countless corruptor warships were captured by gravity and fell towards the sphere. Only the corruptor destroyers equipped with anti-gravity engines and far away from the sphere could escape. Soon, the two originally huge corruptor fleets were reduced to less than half of their warships, most of which were destroyers. Damn it, keep chasing. The cruisers that the two commanders were riding on were far away from the sphere and had powerful anti-gravity engines, so they all escaped. Seeing that nearly half of the corruptor warships had survived and the surviving warships were chasing him, Mingze hurriedly ordered the two dreadnoughts to jump into hyperspace. Chapter 321 Countdown to the Fall of the Defense Line. Follow-up. Kill them. Seeing the two Imperial dreadnoughts jumping into hyperspace, the commanders of the two corruptor fleets said angrily. They were already blinded by anger at this time. No, sir, we are affected by the gravity well generated by the huge sphere and cannot jump, the corruptor officer in charge of the jump said frustratedly. Drive forward until we can jump into hyperspace, the corruptor commander sighed. If the Imperial fleet was given enough reaction time, he was worried that the Imperial fleet would set a trap on the other side. But now they can't jump into hyperspace, and it is impossible to give up the encirclement of the two Imperial dreadnoughts. Unlike the two Imperial dreadnoughts that have achieved amazing results, the Imperial space fortress that has just been built is now in a bitter battle on the only way from the Corruptor Star region to the Imperial Star region. The Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet composed of 5 fleets, the 4th Fleet, the 5th Fleet, and the 8th Fleet, arrived in front of the Imperial space fortress. Although the fortresses had withstood the first salvo of the Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet with its thick shields, the shield reserve that had already reached the bottom indicated that if the Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet launched another salvo, the Empire's fortresses would likely lose the protection of their shields and be directly exposed to the Corruptor's shells. Taking advantage of the time when the Corruptor warship's main guns were charging, there were no secondary guns, only one main gun. The Empire's space fortresses fired wildly at the Corruptor fleet, completely disregarding the loss of their weapons. This high-intensity, uncooled shooting greatly reduced the service life of the weapons, even to less than 1% of their designed life, but so what? Who knows if these weapons will still be useful after the next round of salvos from the Corruptor fleet. Maybe by then the fortresses will have been destroyed. While the fixed turrets on the fortresses were firing wildly, the staff in the fortresses had already boarded the evacuation spacecraft and flew to the next fortress group. These fortress groups were the Empire's defense lines one after another, and the Corruptors were already attacking the Empire's temporary first line of defense. Behind the first line of defense is the second line of defense, which took longer to build and is more complete. Behind the second line of defense is the third line of defense, which took the longest time to build and consumed the most resources. It is also the last line of defense of the Empire. It is also the location of the material transmission transfer station. If this third line of defense is breached, it will not only mean that the Empire's homeland is like a piece of fat meat placed in front of a hungry wolf, but also that the Empire's fleet deep into the territory of the Corruptor will lose its supply capacity. Without the supply capacity, the survival materials of the Empire's expeditionary fleet can only last for 3 years, and the ammunition can only support 2 medium-intensity battles. It can be said that the fall of the last line of defense represents the victory or failure of the Empire in this war. Your Majesty, the fleet of the Corruptor has reached our first line of defense. Although the fortress of the first line of defense has tried its best to resist, the strength of the Corruptor expeditionary fleet is too strong. Our first line of defense can only last for 1 more day at most. Tianyi came to Mingze with a somewhat ugly face. The first line of defense can still hold out for 1 day. It takes 6 days to get from the first line of defense to the second line of defense. How long can the second line of defense hold out? Mingze's face also looked a little ugly. The number of fortresses in our second line of defense is twice that of the first line of defense. In addition to the Corruptor warships destroyed by the first line of defense, the second line of defense can hold out for a little more than 2 days. Tianyi closed his eyes and calculated for half a second before answering. 2 days for the second line of defense plus the previous 7 days. This is 9 days, and the journey from the second line of defense to the third line of defense also takes 6 days. How long can our third line of defense hold out? Li Mingze's face had turned a little dark. Our third line of defense is the most complete, with the largest number of fortresses, and is also equipped with fighter jets and unmanned turrets, but even so, it can only hold out for 4 days at most. Tianyi shook his head. The 4 days for the third line of defense plus the 15 days before, we have 19 days, and it takes nearly 20 days for the third line of defense to reach the Imperial Star Field. That means we only have 39 days at most. And the best time is 19 days. Li Mingze closed his eyes and frowned. Yes, Your Majesty, but it will take us 15 days to reach the capital circle of the Corruptor from our current position, and this is without any battle on the way. Tianyi nodded. We continue to circle with the 2 encirclement and suppression fleets of the Corruptor, and order the second squadron to advance at full speed immediately and break into the capital circle of the Corruptor, Li Mingze ordered Tianyi. Tianyi nodded, controlled the dreadnought to jump out of the hyperspace, and flew in another direction. At this time, there were still 18 days left before the third line of defense fell. The fleet of the second squadron of the Empire was accelerating through the blind spot marked by Lis and flew towards the capital star system of the Corruptor civilization. Although Lis wanted to use the encirclement and suppression fleet of the Corruptor to weaken the strength of the Imperial fleet, he did not want to kill the Imperial fleet, so the route given was still quite reliable. The second squadron fleet did not encounter any manned administrative planet or space fortress along the way. The 2 Imperial dreadnoughts on the other side began to circle with the 2 encirclement fleets that followed closely. Because of the fear of exposing the other fleet on the way, Li Mingze ordered the 2 squadron fleets not to open fire, but to run away, and not to kill even a chicken along the way. Only by giving the Corruptor's capital a surprise suddenly can the effect Li Mingze wants be achieved. There are still 12 days left before the third line of defense is destroyed. The Corruptor's expeditionary fleet has easily destroyed the fortress group of the Empire's first line of defense and came to the outside of the second line of defense. Although this line of defense has more than twice as many space fortresses as the first line of defense. This is not a problem for the Corruptor's expeditionary fleet, which is extremely large in number. You have more fortresses, and our fleet has more warships. If you can't compete with us in quality, we will compete in quantity. This is the Corruptor's tactics. No matter how many Imperial fortresses there are, the countless Corruptor warships can surround the Imperial fortresses in all directions. Attack the Imperial fortress group 360 degrees without dead ends. The surrounded Imperial fortress could only randomly fire in all directions. Anyway, the surrounding areas were densely packed with Corruptor warships, and a random sweep could kill several of them without missing a single shot. Similarly, the destructive power of a large number of Corruptor warships was also very considerable. Chapter 322, Race Against Time. Although the combat effectiveness of a single Corruptor warship is not high, the huge number of the Corruptor fleet covers up this defect. Just like a group of ants can bite an elephant to death, the power of the group is very terrible. Countless shells instantly destroyed a small half of the shields of the Space Fortress group that the Empire had specially strengthened the shield's strength. Although the Space Fortress group kept firing wildly around, before the next salvo of the Corruptor fleet, at most tens of thousands of Corruptor warships would be taken away. Although tens of thousands of warships seem to be a lot, for the Corruptors with 30 million warships, it is like scratching a little skin, and it still doesn't feel the pain. When the Corruptor fleet finished accumulating energy and fired a second salvo, the shield of the Empire's Space Fortress group had reached the bottom. If the Corruptor fired another salvo, the Empire's Fortress group would lose the protection of the shield. At this time, a large number of fortresses suddenly lowered the outer layer of heavy armor, revealing a honeycomb-shaped launch nest, and tens of millions of mass acceleration shells shot out from these fixed artillery storm launchers, flying towards the Corruptor fleet that surrounded the space fortress. The Corruptors did not expect that the dying Imperial Space Fortress group would still have such a trick up their sleeves. The Corruptor fleet, which was in a very compact formation, was like a target that was delivered to their doorstep. The mass acceleration shell hit rate of these shell storms reached 99% under the formation of the Corruptor fleet. Such a high hit rate brought huge casualties of up to hundreds of thousands. The Corruptor warships parked in the front position turned into flying debris under the attack of countless shells. Unfortunately, these shell storms are disposable and cannot be reloaded because they occupy too large a volume. Of course, This is also related to the cost reduction for mass construction. After one shot, the shell storm launchers in these space fortresses will be completely damaged and can only be dismantled and installed with new ones. However, the Empire originally intended to use the first two lines of defense as disposable consumables. Their role is to delay the time for the third line of defense as much as possible so that the third line of defense can be more adequately prepared. After dispersing the formation, the commander of the Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet waited for a long time before he found that the Empire did not attack again. Only then did he realize that the weapon of the Imperial Space Fortress was disposable. Feeling fooled, the Corruptor commander fiercely ordered the fleet to press forward and fill the gaps between the warships again. At this time, the Imperial Space Fortress had successfully delayed for another 6 hours. With these 6 hours, the shields of the Imperial Space Fortress had recovered 20%. With the remaining 20% of the shields, the Imperial Space Fortress could resist the next salvo of the Corruptor fleet again, which invisibly delayed the Empire for several more hours. After several hours of energy storage, the Corruptor fleet fired again, hitting the shields of the Imperial Space Fortress group to a state where only a trace of it remained. The second line of defense was already in danger. At this time, the second detachment of the Imperial Expeditionary Fleet was very close to the capital star system of the incubator, and it only took 8 or 9 days to reach it. There are still 4 days before the third line of defense falls. At this time, the second line of defense had been breached by the Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet 6 days ago, and countless fortress wreckage was suspended in disorder in the universe. The Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet has even arrived outside the last line of defense of the Empire. At this time, hundreds of huge space fortresses are distributed in the galaxy in a spherical shape on the last line of defense of the Empire. The advantage of this formation is that no matter which direction the enemy is in, at least half of the space fortresses can attack them. The space fortresses on the other side can also attack the enemy on this side, through the huge gaps between the fortresses on this side. In addition, in the hangars of all the fortresses, rows of space fighters stacked together have all been fully charged, and nuclear warhead missiles have been installed in the fighters. In the drone launch bay on the other side, countless drones have also been loaded with missiles, quietly waiting for the order to come. And around the fortress, there are densely packed unmanned artillery turrets, which are constantly rotating in space, scanning the vast starry sky. At the back of the space fortress, the newly built Imperial warships were quietly suspended in space. After the first round of salvos from the Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet, they would come out in droves with the space fighters and drones. A few hours later, the well-prepared Corruptor fleet arrived outside the range of the Empire's third line of defense. With the commander's order, countless Corruptor warships formed a huge wall-shaped formation. The Corruptor destroyers with thick armor and shields were lined up in the front, forming a shield wall. The other replacement destroyers were lined up behind the first destroyer, and then behind were the Corruptor frigates and 5 Corruptor flagships, cruisers. The reason why the Corruptor commander chose this formation is that in this kind of hard-hitting offensive and defensive battle, instead of flying around, it is better to use the shield advantage of large warships to attract firepower, while the relatively weak defense frigates follow behind and can shoot at the enemy in front at the right time. Fire! With the order from the Corruptor commander, countless shells flew out from behind the shield wall and flew towards the Empire's space fortresses. However, it was obvious that such a large number of shells would not cause much damage to the Empire's fortresses that had already connected their shields together. It seemed that conquering this line of defense was a long-term project. After being fired at by the Corruptor Expeditionary Fleet, the Empire's fortresses were not to be outdone. While countless main guns were firing, the outer armor of the fortresses also opened up, revealing the shell storm launchers inside. All spare destroyers are ready to replace. Seeing that the Empire had unexpectedly revealed this disposable weapon, the Corruptor commander sneered in disdain. As the wrapping paper of the shell storm launcher's launch port was torn open by the shells, one shell after another rushed towards the Corruptor fleet. The Corruptor warships did not dodge, but ordered the destroyers in the second row to prepare to replace the destroyers in the first row. But this group of Corruptors never thought that the Empire would not play by the rules at all, and all the mass acceleration shells were replaced with extremely expensive nuclear warheads. These mass accelerating shells are no longer kinetic weapons. Countless small nuclear explosions flashed on the Corruptor's shield wall. The blinding white light caused the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Imperial Fortress Command Center to automatically change color until the light was no longer so blinding. Chapter 323 2 days. Tens of seconds later, as the flash of the nuclear explosion disappeared, the first row of Corruptor destroyers appeared. The first row of Corruptor destroyers that originally formed the shield wall had been blown into pieces, and the second row of destroyers were also affected by the debris flying everywhere, and the shields began to flicker continuously. While the weapons of the Corruptor fleet still needed some time to charge, the fighters in the Imperial Space Fortress were transferred to the launch pad by mechanical arms. As flames came out of the tail thrusters of the fighters, one after another, the fighters rushed out of the fortress hangar and rushed towards the Corruptor fleet. The drone hive in the fortress was also ready. As the hive door opened, countless drones rushed out on both sides of the Imperial fighters. From the perspective of the Corruptor fleet, a dark cloud suddenly emerged from the Imperial Space Fortress. After these Imperial fighters and drones flew close to the Corruptor fleet, they launched the nuclear missiles carried by the fighters. Missiles surged towards the Corruptor fleet like a wave. However, the Corruptor warships, having learned their lesson, used dozens of huge tentacles on the warships to roll up pieces of debris and throw them at the Empire's missile rain. The huge power of the tentacles instantly accelerated the debris to terrifying speed, and the rapidly ejected debris instantly formed a high-speed moving curtain wall, heading towards the waves of the Empire's missiles. As the distance between the two sides got closer and closer, the curtain wall composed of debris and the waves composed of missiles collided together. Flashes flashed from the impact point, which were nuclear explosion flashes produced by nuclear missiles hitting the debris and detonating. With the bursts of nuclear explosions, the curtain wall composed of debris began to gradually melt, and similarly, the number of missiles also decreased rapidly. After more than 10 seconds, the curtain wall of debris thrown by the Corruptors had been completely broken by the missiles, and the few remaining missiles continued to rush towards the Corruptor fleet. However, the damage to the Corruptor destroyers by the remaining less than 10% of nuclear missiles was extremely limited. With the explosions, only more than 10,000 destroyers of the Corruptors blocking the front of the fleet were destroyed, but this number was not a big deal for the Corruptors' expeditionary fleet of nearly 30 million warships. After dropping their bombs, the Imperial fighters and drones drew an arc in the air and retreated towards the space fortress. Because the main guns of the Corruptor fleet were still charging, they could only unwillingly roll up pieces of debris from the explosion and throw them in the direction where the Imperial fighters left. However, the speed of these debris still could not catch up with the evacuating fighters, and they slowly flew over after the fighters were about to enter the hangar. The Empire naturally did not give these debris a chance to hit the fortress. Countless close-in defense guns smashed these debris one by one, and the debris fragments that were beaten into powder hit the fortress shield without even causing ripples. After the Empire attacked again for nearly an hour, the main guns of the Corruptor fleet were finally charged, and the Corruptor warships aimed at the Empire's fortress and fired shells again. While the Corruptor expeditionary fleet and the Empire's last line of defense were fighting fiercely, the second detachment of the Empire expeditionary fleet was finally approaching the Corruptor's capital star. At this time, the maintenance drones of the previous generation civilization had already replenished half of the energy in the two dreadnoughts. The Crescent also created a new mass projection warhead in the warship. Mingze, who had been making a big circle with the two encirclement and suppression fleets following him, decided to start a desperate counterattack. Start reversing the ship after the next jump out of hyperspace. After reversing to a safe position, the two warships will wait for my order to fire the main guns, Mingze ordered in a deep voice. He was already looking forward to another battle with the Corruptor. A few hours later, the two dreadnoughts jumped out of hyperspace again, but this time the two warships did not continue to move forward to the starting point of the next jump, but began to slowly retreat to the rear. After several hours, flashes of light appeared, and the Corruptor suppression fleet, following the two dreadnoughts of the Empire, appeared in the area where the Imperial warships had just been. Now, fire. While the two siege fleets had not reacted, Mingze decisively ordered Tianyi to control the main guns and aim at the two fleets to fire. When the high-quality shells of the Crescent crashed into the Corruptor fleet, the commanders of the two fleets realized that the Imperial warships that were supposed to be in front of them had run behind them at some point. Fortunately, in order to prevent an ambush, they used the dispersed formation, and the gravity weapons of the Sith Empire should not cause much damage to them. As they expected, because the formation was too dispersed, The gravitational waves generated by the two main gun shells fired by the Empire collided with each other, and only attracted 1/7 of the corruptor warships. This is not worth mentioning compared to the record of sucking away half of the previous few times. Although this attack did not meet expectations, a mosquito is still meat, and a 1/7 weakening still has a very large impact on the outcome of the battle. Just like the battle with the first fleet of the corruptors, Mingze commanded the Crescent to rush into the enemy camp, while the Michigan was responsible for covering on the side. The secondary guns of the two dreadnoughts fired wildly at the corruptor fleet, and one corruptor warship after another was turned into wreckage. However, relying on the advantage in numbers, the two corruptor fleets quickly surrounded the Imperial fleet. Mingze showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Under Mingze's control, countless maintenance drones flew out of the two dreadnoughts and rushed towards the surrounding corruptor fleets. However, because the number of corruptor warships this time was much larger than that of the first fleet, and the energy of the maintenance drones was only half, it was impossible to eliminate all the corruptor warships at once. As expected, after destroying less than half of the corruptor warships, the maintenance drones of the previous generation of civilization began to alarm with low energy. Mingze had no choice but to take these drones back to the two dreadnoughts. Looking at the remaining half of the corruptor warships, Mingze was extremely anxious and began to think rapidly. Got it, Mingze's eyes flashed with brilliance and he clapped his hands fiercely. Order the two warships to turn off their shields and accelerate side by side. We will crash into the corruptor fleet. Let's have a head-on confrontation, Mingze shouted excitedly. Yes, Your Majesty. Tianyi glanced at Mingze and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. The shields of the two dreadnoughts suddenly disappeared, revealing the silver armor inside. Seeing this scene, the corruptor commander was confused. What was the Sith Empire planning to do? Why did they turn off their shields? Chapter 324, Arrival at the Corruptor Capital. However, the following scene let the two corruptor commanders know the reason why the Imperial warships shut down their shields. The two Imperial dreadnoughts suddenly accelerated and rushed towards the corruptor fleet in front of them. Although the corruptor warships wanted to dodge, they had already extinguished their main thrusters when they were in the encirclement formation. It was completely impossible for the remaining secondary thrusters to push the huge warships away in time, and it would take a long time for the main thrusters to reignite. So the corruptors could only watch the two Imperial dreadnoughts crashing into the corruptor warship array like a mountain. The two Imperial dreadnoughts carried huge kinetic energy and crashed into the corruptor warship array. The hard outer armor collided with the shield of the corruptor warship and shattered it instantly. Then the outer armor of the corruptor warship and the armor of the Imperial dreadnought came into close contact. The energy-absorbing tissue of the corruptor began to frantically absorb the kinetic energy carried by the Imperial dreadnought. However, due to the huge weight of the Empire's dreadnoughts, the kinetic energy they carried when accelerating to 5% of the speed of light far exceeded the upper limit of the energy absorption organization of these corruptor warships. One by one, the corruptor warships were smashed into pieces of wreckage in space. However, because the materials used to make the Empire's dreadnoughts were too hard, the two dreadnoughts did not suffer any damage after the collision. The impact force on the hull structure is increasing, and it has reached 1.36% of the limit value. Millions of sensors inside the two dreadnoughts transmitted data from various parts of the hull to the bridge. It's still early, keep increasing the thrust. Smash them, Mingze slapped the handrail. The two dreadnoughts continued to accelerate and crashed forward, smashing all the corruptor warships that blocked the way. The two dreadnoughts were like icebreakers, and the hard ice they went to was smashed by the hard bow. The whole process sounds slow, but in fact the speed of the spacecraft has reached 5% of the speed of light, so all the collisions happened in the blink of an eye. Before the corruptor warships could react, the two Empire dreadnoughts had already crashed out of the corruptor fleet's encirclement formation. By the time the corruptors reacted and began to ignite the main thrusters of their warships, the two Empire dreadnoughts had adjusted their postures and crashed back into the corruptor fleet array. Another series of explosions occurred in the corruptor fleet, and tens of thousands of warships were once again blasted by the two Empire dreadnoughts. However, by the time the Empire dreadnoughts were ready for the third round of collision, all the corruptor warships had already ignited and began to fly irregularly in space. If they continued to collide, the damage that the Empire dreadnoughts could cause would be extremely limited. Let's retreat. Seeing that the effect of continuing to collide would be limited, Mingze decisively ordered the two dreadnoughts to jump into hyperspace. The commanders of the two siege fleets watched the two dreadnoughts disappear in front of their eyes and were so angry that they almost vomited 3 liters of blood. Outside the Corruptor capital circle, the second squadron forgotten by the Corruptor fleet appeared in the starry sky. With the appearance of this fleet, a shrill alarm sounded in the command center of the Corruptor capital star. Their super-large radar has scanned the huge signal source composed of tens of thousands of small signals appearing outside the capital star system. This signal source is undoubtedly the fleet of the Sith Empire. They originally thought that under the search of their own fleet, the Empire's expeditionary fleet had returned to their star region or hidden. Unexpectedly, this fleet actually went deep into the vicinity of their capital star system alone. You know, the Empire's fleet can't get any supplies here. Once a large-scale battle occurs, the Empire's fleet may be in a desperate situation of running out of ammunition and food. How dare they go deep alone? Quick! Summon our 2 siege fleets to return to the capital star system to help defend, the commander-in-chief of the military department hurriedly shouted to the communications officer. All defense fortresses should charge their weapons, and all spare warships should be activated. We should leave these little bugs here, the commander-in-chief said as he hurriedly walked towards the president's office. As you command, the officer who received the order hurriedly ran away. Your Excellency, are you in there? The commander-in-chief knocked gently on the door of the president's office. Come in, the president's deep voice came from the room. The commander-in-chief gently pushed the door open and walked into the dark office. After he entered the office, the door of the office closed automatically. Are you looking for me because of the appearance of the fleet of the Sith Empire on the capital star? The president in a black robe slowly walked out of the shadow of the room. Yes, my lord, the commander-in-chief nodded. Don't worry, I have my own plan for this matter. Don't let the expedition fleet return to help. The president waved his hand and walked into the shadow again. Yes, knowing that the president had his own ideas, the commander-in-chief backed out of the open door. When he came out of the door, his back was soaked with sweat. The pressure from this leader was too strong. It was okay when facing a group of people, but when he faced it alone, he felt as if he might die at any time. A few hours later, the fleet of the second squadron of the Empire had entered the star system of the capital of the Corruptor. 4 planets with huge transparent hard shells on their surfaces were rotating around the central star in an orderly manner on the same orbit. On these transparent shells, countless tentacles could be seen flying in the air from time to time. If you look closely, you will find that these hard shells are composed of scaly carapaces, and the edges of these carapaces are red biological tissues. Under these tissues are vesicles wrapped in liquid, and I don't know what they are used for. Sir, which planet is the capital of the Corruptor? In the bridge of the second squadron flagship, an officer asked Monica, the commander of the second squadron. According to the information we have received, the planet with 8 huge space stations suspended on its surface is the capital of the Corruptor, Angara. Monica enlarged the holographic screen in her hand until only one planet was left. All warships, pay attention, head to the target planet at full speed. We will fight quickly and completely destroy this planet. Monica picked up the intercom and shouted to all the warships. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. After many warships responded, the thrusters began to exert force suddenly, pushing the warships towards Angara. The Corruptor officers on Angara were also facing a great enemy, and all the fixed artillery aimed at the direction of the Imperial fleet. The warships in the space station port were also ready to go. Chapter 325 Gaining Air Supremacy. The upgraded battleships are in the front, the remaining battleships are in the second row, and the cruisers and destroyers are in the last row. Following Monica's command, the few upgraded battleships in the fleet were in the front of the fleet. They will use their shields and the powerful hulls forged with the metal of the previous civilization to resist the first wave of attacks. Because the range of the Corruptor's power guns is much higher than that of the Empire's fleet, when the Empire's fleet has not yet entered the range, the Corruptor's shells have already rushed over in an overwhelming manner. The shields of the hundreds of upgraded battleships leading the way were shattered after holding on for a few seconds, and then these shells hit the hulls of the upgraded battleships. The armor and keels of the battleships, which were strengthened with the metal of the previous civilization, struggled to withstand this overwhelming attack, and the tolerance value of each battleship was close to the warning line. Fortunately, the attack intensity of these Corruptors has not yet reached the point where the upgraded battleships collapse. Upgraded battleships withdraw, ordinary battleships take the top, aim at the first Corruptor fortress, fire all at once and then retreat immediately. After discovering that the corruptors relied on fixed artillery that could not be moved, Monica decisively adopted this hit-and-run tactic. Hundreds of thousands of beams of light and shells from the Imperial 2nd Division fleet shot at the first floating space fortress on the corruptor capital planet. The corruptor space fortress's trash shield did not last more than 2 seconds before it was shattered by the Empire's weapons. The remaining shells and beams hit the armor of the corruptor fortress one after another. Although the fortress's energy-absorbing structure had tried its best to absorb the energy, there were too many salvos this time, and the power was too strong. The first space fortress of the corruptor did not survive this salvo at all and was blown into flying fragments by countless attacks. After a successful attack, the Imperial fleet retreated at full speed in the direction they came from, not giving the corruptor's fortress guns any chance to attack. When the corruptor's kinetic cannons were almost fully charged, they discovered that the Empire's fleet had withdrawn beyond their effective range. A few hours later, after the Empire's upgraded battleships had fully restored their shields, the Empire's fleet once again rushed towards the corruptor's fortress under the leadership of the upgraded battleships. This time, the corruptors had obviously learned their lesson. They no longer evenly distributed their firepower to the upgraded battleships led by the Imperial fleet, but instead targeted 20 upgraded battleships for concentrated attacks. Under this concentrated fire attack, the Empire's upgraded battleships were not as lucky as last time. The kinetic energy carried by countless shells had exceeded the tolerance of the previous generation of civilization's metal armor on the battleships. The 20 targeted Empire upgraded battleships turned into a pile of fragments in a burst of fire. Monica's eyes twitched. Although such a loss was a bit large, it would be worth it if they could capture their capital star before the corruptor reinforcements arrived. Aim at the second space fortress. Fire. Monica picked up the communicator and shouted. The Imperial fleet, having received the order, aimed the guns of the warships at the second fortress in the orbit of the corruptor capital star. At this time, although the expeditionary force did not receive the order to withdraw, the two fleets responsible for encircling the two dreadnoughts of the Empire received the communication from the capital star. After knowing that the capital star was at risk of falling, the two fleets immediately turned around and rushed to the capital star. Mingze, who had been chased by them for a long time, also received good news from the 2nd Squadron fleet. This time, the positions of their two dreadnoughts had a big reversal, from being chased to chasing. The two dreadnoughts began to chase the two corruptor fleets that were withdrawn to the capital star, intending to interfere with their return and buy time for the attack of the 2nd Squadron. One day later, Tianyi calculated that there were still 2 days left before the fall of the Empire's last line of defense. After a long intense battle, half of the space fortresses on the Empire's third line of defense had been destroyed by the corruptor fleet, and more than half of the newly built warships and fighters had been lost. At this time, the Second Fleet finally received good news. After more than 20 hours of attack, 45 upgraded battleships and 113 ordinary battleships were sacrificed. The Second Fleet finally succeeded in taking down the outer space fortress of the corruptor civilization's capital planet. Now the corruptor's capital planet is like a naked girl, at the mercy of the Empire's Second Fleet. Use orbital weapons to attack the corruptor's capital planet immediately and blow it into a lava planet. Mingze, who was chasing the two corruptor encirclement fleets, gave the order decisively. After destroying the corruptor's command center, he didn't believe that the remaining corruptors could still unite and attack the Empire's defense line in an orderly manner. According to what he learned from Liss, there are 6 major families among the corruptor's top leaders, and these 6 major families are usually full of open and secret struggles. I believe that after the corruptor's capital planet is destroyed, there will definitely be a family that will take the opportunity to seize control of the corruptor civilization. At that time, it will be the time for the Empire to reap the benefits. Monica nodded after receiving Mingze's order, and lifted a glass cover on the control console in front of her, revealing the red button inside. Orbital bombardment authority is enabled. Target the corruptor capital planet in front of us, and start bombing. After saying that, Monica pressed the button hard. At this time, she recalled the time when she was just rescued by the Empire. At that time, the Empire was just a weak civilization that had just stepped into the interstellar space. At that time, the Empire's warships were still a weak fleet composed of frigates and destroyers. At that time, the Empire even used a large number of transport ships to transport orbital weapons in order to eliminate the Zerg on her home planet. When she pressed the attack button, The scene of the entire planet's surface being burned into glass by nuclear weapons was vivid, as if it happened yesterday. Now, she stood in front of the button again and pressed it, but this time she was no longer facing the Zerg, but the capital of a civilization hostile to the Empire. But now she no longer felt anything, as if she had seen life and death, and the life and death of people on a planet could no longer arouse any sympathy in her. She only knew that anyone who stood in the way of the Empire was an enemy and must be eradicated, and Li Mingze's orders took the first place. Even if he ordered her to destroy the world, she would not hesitate. As the buttons were pressed, the orbital attack permissions on each warship were unlocked one after another, and the armor on the belly of the warships began to unfold to both sides, revealing the neatly stacked nuclear warheads inside. 3, 2, 1, as the countdown ended, nuclear warheads fell from the warships one by one, falling towards the corruptor capital planet that was already below the fleet. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.